Chapter 5106. King Fulin's wrinkled old face twisted slightly. With a sullen face, he suddenly rushed to the cage and slapped it hard, shouting, "Great Elder, did you come here today to see this prince make a fool of himself?" Great Elder Kong Yin shook his head. If it weren't for the heir's dying instructions, this old monk wouldn't have come here. The heir had long expected that the prince would have such a day and had already instructed this old monk earlier. If Wang Yi is really imprisoned for conspiring against the law, let this old monk pass a message to Wang Yi. King Fulin's old face twitched a few times. This prince doesn't want to hear it. The gray-haired old man slammed his palm on the cage. Sizzling electric currents slid through his body, causing his whole body to tremble uncontrollably. This son had never been of one mind with him. More than 10 years ago, people said that father and son soldiers were of one mind when going into battle, but what about him? As the crown prince of Fulin, he only wished to live his life as a yes-man. He had no grand ambitions, no foresight, not even the slightest bit. It was simply a disgrace to him, King Fulin. So from more than 10 years ago, he only pretended that he had never given birth to this son, leaving them to fend for themselves in a broken place like Seacombe Planet, and never thought of looking for them. The heir said that if the prince still remembers the trace of kinship, please let that child go. Don't ever look for him, and don't ever reveal his identity. Impossible. King Fulin slammed his palm on the cage, ignoring the electric currents that flowed through his palm, roasting his skin and flesh. His dim old eyes stared fixedly at Kong Yin, coldly enunciating each word, "That's my grandson. His father has no ambition, but there's still hope for him. He must inherit the mantle of King Fulin. As long as he is nurtured well, he can, there's no hope." Great Elder Kong Yin coldly interrupted King Fulin. This child was already a monk at birth. And it was personally shaved by the heir of King Fulin. His mother was exhausted and worried all day long, and died during childbirth. Kong Yin said coldly, "Heir apparent has been worrying too much all year round, and his health has been deteriorating. So, less than a month after the child became a monk, he also passed away." King Fulin slapped the cage heavily and said with a cold expression, "This king will never admit it. What do you plan to do?" Kong Yin's face turned cold, revealing a rare trace of anger. "You're already in prison and you still don't want to give up. You still want to nurture your own grandson and walk on a path of no return that is hard to predict. What right do you have to dictate other people's lives? Then what right do you have to control him? Have you ever asked him if he wants to shave his head and become a monk?" Great Elder Kong Yin fell silent. Indeed, they had no right to speak on this matter. "What do you want?" "I must see him," King Fulin said coldly. Ever since he learned of this grandson's existence, he had people bring him back from Seacombe Planet. However, he was still one step behind. Kong Yin, that old bald donkey, took his grandson away first, and he had no choice but to have people chase him all the way, trying to snatch him back. The strangest thing was, he clearly knew that his grandson had been staying by the little crown princess's side, but his people had secretly gone to look for him several times, and every time they came up empty-handed. It was as if his whereabouts were somewhat elusive. Chapter 5107. The child's whereabouts had always been very elusive. Every time the secret guards reported, they would say that they saw the little Gongzi hovering in front of the crown princess for 2 hours, and then try to catch him, but he would disappear again. So he always had reason to suspect that the crown princess should have some kind of magical weapon that could take away his little grandson. Therefore, his men always missed their target and were unable to catch his grandson in the normal way. "What will it take for you to stop?" King Fulin gloomily glared at Kong Yin. "Blood ties can't be erased, he will always be my grandson." Kong Yin couldn't help sneering, "You are really selfish." King Fulin looked at him coldly, "I was wondering why you didn't come to me. Sure enough, you can't keep your cool. If this old monk didn't come to you, you would have done everything possible to inform me to come, wouldn't you? King Fulin sneered, Great Elder really knows me well. My request is very simple, if you are willing to get me out of this prison, absolutely impossible. That's a pity. King Fulin glared at him fiercely, if you can make the decision to let me out of here, I can consider never acknowledging this grandson in this life. King Fulin, it's really bad luck to be your son and grandson. No wonder your bastard sons and daughters are almost all dead these years. This was probably the most vicious sentence that Great Elder Kong Yin, who was a monk, had said in recent years. King Fulin didn't care at all, just coldly staring at Great Elder Kong Yin, you have no children, what do you know? This prince is also fighting for them. Unfortunately, these people are too weak and don't have the fortune to enjoy it. In order to build his great cause over the years, he had sacrificed many children. He had never carefully counted. His daughters were sent out to build connections, no matter who they married, as long as they were useful. As for those bastard sons, they naturally had to sacrifice and fight for the great cause. Even if they had to risk their lives, they had to ensure the prosperous development of the country of Daluo. In the Pingjin grassland, where resources were scarce, they would do anything. Sometimes, they would even wipe out an entire tribe just for half a month's worth of food. Your so-called good fortune is really not something that ordinary people can enjoy. Great Elder Kong Yin laughed mockingly. Cut the crap. King Fulin's face twisted as he slammed the pillar of the water prison. If you don't bring him to me by tomorrow, don't blame me for saying anything. After all, my grandson may be young, but he's my grandson. Logically speaking, he should be buried with a traitor like me. King Fulin sneered. Do you believe that if you do anything to hurt that child, the little crown princess will be the first to come after you? After saying this, Great Elder Kong Yin felt that there was no way to continue talking with this person, so he turned around and left. He felt that if he continued to talk to this person, he might not be able to restrain himself from killing him. It was too unreasonable. His self-restraint as a monk was almost worn out in front of King Fulin. Taking a deep breath, Kong Yin turned and left, leaving King Fulin's roar behind his mind. Kong Yin. King Fulin's roar came, tomorrow's sunset is your deadline. Wait. Chapter 5108. You mustn't forget. This prince is capable of doing anything. Of course you can do anything. For a scum like you, who else can you think of in this lifetime besides yourself? Great Elder Kong Yin furiously struck out with his palm. The vast and mighty force pushed the wave forward and slammed heavily on the water cage, producing a loud bang. Less than 4 hours after Great Elder Kong Yin angrily left the water prison with a dark and bright face, everyone in the imperial court had heard about it. Everyone was guessing what had happened. After all, Great Elder Kong Yin had set up a soundproof barrier when he had a private conversation with Prince Fulin. With Great Elder's cultivation, no one could casually approach him. Hence, everyone was very curious about the contents of their conversation. What exactly did Prince Fulin say to Great Elder Kong Yin to provoke Great Elder to this extent? That was Great Elder Kong Yin, who rarely got angry even once in 100 years. Prince Fulin was truly quite remarkable to actually anger Great Elder to the point of smashing the water prison. The ministers in the imperial court were all secretly guessing, extremely curious about this matter. When the news reached the young crown princess's ears, the little stoic had just finished washing up and was led to the table by His Highness the Crown Prince. The two of them sat down to eat breakfast. Saichi, this little girl, vividly recounted the matter she had scouted out to the young crown princess in full detail. The little stoic didn't pay much attention and was currently focused on scooping up the porridge in her bowl with a spoon. Her eyes sparkled with every mouthful. When His Highness the Crown Prince, who was sitting across from her, saw this, he very cheerfully said, "The small kitchen cooked pretty good porridge today." Reward. "Yes, Your Highness." Saichi jogged outside with a grin. Saishio shook her head helplessly and said quietly, "Please forgive me, Your Highness. This girl's personality is truly too jumpy. It's fine. Prince Mo waved his hand and looked at his wife with a grin. Jojo, did you sleep well last night? Did darling Mo disturb your sleep? No. Then, do we have anything special to do today? Let's read. Prince Mo, his wife was too much. The weather was so good today. Why was she reading at home? The imperial doctor said that Jojo is in good health. She needs to move around more after she's pregnant so that her delivery will be smoother. So, how about we go out for a walk today? Jojo pursed his lips and suddenly changed the topic. When will my mother and the others come back? She suddenly sat up straight and looked at him with bright eyes. Are we going out to meet my mother? The crown prince's sea of jealousy rippled slightly. He muttered unhappily, you weren't willing to accompany me on a walk. When you heard that we were going to see mother, your eyes lit up. Okay. The little crown princess replied decisively. Humph, the little stoic suddenly smiled at him and stretched her hand across the table, poking the back of his hand as she said crisply, outing. Mo Lian's heart also rippled. He pushed the chair away and walked quickly to her side. He pulled her over with one hand. Wife, you're so beautiful when you smile at your husband. Great joy for your highness, great joy for the crown princess. While the two were talking, they saw Hu Dequan leading 20 or so people in 2 rows. They were holding a large pile of gifts as they walked in with smiles on their faces. The little stoic looked at him expressionlessly. Where did the joy come from? Hu Dequan almost couldn't continue laughing, and he quickly cut to the chase. His Majesty was overjoyed when he learned that the crown princess was pregnant with a dragon fetus, so he prepared many gifts for the crown princess. They continued at 12 o'clock and went to eat. Chapter 5109. I'm already 3 months pregnant, and the emperor only remembered to congratulate me? Sir Jojo muttered expressionlessly. Hu Dequan almost burst into tears again. This little ancestor, you didn't say anything, did you? The emperor only learned about it from the empress last night. Didn't he rush over early in the morning to deliver this and that for you? Prince Mo also waved his hand expressionlessly. Leave it there. We're just about to go out. When we return, we'll take a look if we're interested. Eunuch Hu, you're His Highness, you're willful. We servants will leave the gift list and items here first, Eunuch Hu said carefully. Eunuch Hu said cautiously, may I know where your highness the crown prince and crown princess are heading out of the palace? This servant will inform his majesty and the empress when I return. Now that the crown princess is pregnant with the dragon fetus, she has to be more careful when she goes out. The little crown princess waved her hand energetically. No need to worry. We're going out for a walk. We'll be back before sunset. After saying that, he took a small step forward and walked out of the door in a very nimble manner. Eunuch Hu's eyes were wide open. This little crown princess walked with such vigor and vigor. She was too fast. The crown prince couldn't help but laugh. He glanced at the dazed Eunuch Hu. All right, you can go back first. Just leave the gift list there. Imperial father was really stingy. He should have given her a gift long ago. His wife was already 3 months pregnant, and he only thought of giving her a gift now. How stingy. If the emperor knew his son's thoughts at this moment, he would definitely want to slap him to death. He only found out about the little crown princess pregnancy yesterday, and he came to give her a gift this morning. Wasn't his actions fast enough? Wasn't his reaction fast enough? Of course, the emperor was also quite excited. He was originally all alone. Now that his wife was awake and his son had a wife, he would have a grandson soon. There was no need to mention how happy he was. Heavens, he was about to be a grandfather. Just thinking about it made him happy. Although his son was henpecked by his wife and was used to being a hands-off shopkeeper, he was still more reliable when it came to giving birth to children. The two of them were still young, and they still had a long way to go. 2 babies in 3 years, 3 babies in 5 years, and so on. While the emperor was happily thinking about this, the crown prince had already prepared a carriage and led the crown princess out of the palace. Kong Yin rushed over early in the morning, only to find that it was empty. Her frown deepened. Classmate Mo leaned against the side of the carriage expressionlessly. Looking at the 3 heads squeezed together beside his wife, he felt gloomy for a while. He had originally wanted to travel hand in hand with his wife and enjoy the world of the two of them intimately. Who would have thought that once they got on the carriage, his wife would release the little monkey Kong Kong and Mo? Why is it called a family outing? Now the 4 heads were huddled together, sitting in a row opposite him. Student Mo felt like crying. He was like an outsider, sitting on the other side of the carriage, and could only look on helplessly as that little bald thief, Kong Kong, chatted happily with his wife. Of course, most of the time, he was alone and talking to himself. For example, benefactress, where are we going now? Are we going to pick up benefactress's mother? Benefactress's mother, how is she now? Are they all okay? Mo obediently placed his hands on his knees and sat upright. He didn't pay much attention to anyone. The little monkey's face was full of impatience. He couldn't help but roll his eyes at the back of the little fat monk's head. His wife, on the other hand, was very patient, unlike her usual self. Chapter 51:10. Basically, for every 10 questions the little monk asked, she would occasionally answer. The two of them chatted very happily, and they chatted all the way. Prince Mo was very depressed, and he really wanted to kick this nagging little monk out of the new fortress Star Field. But his wife said that the little monk had not seen real sunlight for many days, and he should be allowed to come out and bask in the sun. This would be good for the child's bone development. Prince Mo was depressed, and he was depressed the whole way. The little monk suddenly said, "Benefactress. Why don't you let Guang Guang out too?" "No." The benefactress heartlessly rejected his request, and the little monk could not help but pout. She was already annoyed enough with a nagging monk, and now there was a nagging Guang Guang as well. How was she going to live her life? Was she going to go for a walk or not? Was she going to see her mother? Just listening to these two nagging was enough to drive her crazy. Guang Guang has been quite miserable recently. The people in the star field don't like to talk to him, and they find him annoying when they see him, and they keep telling him to shut up. Little Monk also doesn't like to talk to him. But thinking about his experience, Little Monk can't help but empathize with him. The more I think about it, the sadder I feel. Everyone, just listening to the Little Monk's first half, one would think that he was overflowing with sympathy, but the second half was not right. After talking for so long, this little monk was just feeling sorry for himself. Arbor could not help but twitch the corner of her mouth, and she looked at him, amused and annoyed. If you don't nag all the time, why would the brothers and sisters in the star field find you annoying? The little monk lowered his little head, and said pitifully, Little Monk was born to worry and nag. If not, Master would not have left Little Monk with Benefactress. Little Monk knows that although Master doesn't usually say anything and only chants Umitba, he must despise Little Monk in his heart. Arbor wanted to laugh, but she could not help but feel sorry for this sentimental little rascal. She hugged him, raised her hand, and lightly knocked on his bald little head. What nonsense are you babbling about? That old bald thief Kong Yin has always cared about you the most. Your master usually doesn't say anything. However, his concern for you has never been erased. He's just not very reliable. When Sir Jojo thought of this, he couldn't help but snort softly. He raised his hand and patted little Baldy's head. With a thought, he released the light condensing mirror. As soon as the light congealing mirror appeared, he immediately took 2 steps forward. When he saw Prince Mo sitting opposite him with a dark expression, he immediately stopped. He very sensibly stepped back and squeezed until he was next to the little monkey and sat down with her in a row. As a result, Prince Mo's seat was empty except for him, emitting an extremely low black pressure. In a row of chairs in arbor, 5 people were squeezed together, head to head, arm to arm, tightly glued together. Crown Prince Mo's mood became increasingly displeased when he saw this polarized phenomenon. What was going on? Why was his life so hard? Usually, he had to fight for favor with the spirits and beasts, but now he had to fight for favor with a few little radishes. It was too infuriating. Prince Mo's face was full of displeasure, unhappiness, and anger. Arbor looked up and saw the Crown Prince's dark handsome face, and could not help but want to laugh. She consciously moved to sit next to the Crown Prince, tomorrow morning, before 10 o'clock in the morning to catch up. Chapter 51:11. She raised her hand to rub her husband's dark face and couldn't help but giggle. Husband, you're emitting a gloomy aura from head to toe. Humph. Prince Mo twisted his head. But when he saw Sir Jojo laugh, his handsome face could no longer keep a straight face. Arbor raised her hand to rub his face and tilted her head to look at him. Husband, where are we going to see Mother? The carriage was heading west of the city. Arbor didn't know what Mo Lien was up to. She tugged at his sleeve, a rare hint of curiosity appearing on her stoic face. How about I guess? Your father knew early on that King Duo Luo and the others were holed up in the black swamp of the Pingjin Prairie. But he never made a move. He was waiting for this King Duo Luo to walk right into his trap. After discovering Duo Luo's movements, your father made first-hand arrangements. He also considered that they might make a move against the Qiao family, so he preemptively moved everyone away. Perhaps because he was in a hurry to move, father probably didn't even tell mother. Afterwards, the 2 fakes ended up empty-handed in the Qiao residence. They beat them at their own game and settled down. Coincidentally, your mother summoned them for a banquet, so they left in high spirits, intending to start a business. Prince Mo broke into a wide grin and nodded repeatedly. Wife, you're so smart. Perhaps your father already knew the identities of the 2 fakes and secretly sent people to keep an eye on them for a long time. Arbor snorted. So even if I didn't make a move that day, the 2 fakes probably wouldn't have been able to escape. This emperor and the muddle-headed old great king of the Mo kingdom were truly 2 polar opposites. Your father really can't say that you're a scammer in the future. Sir Jojo said with a stoic face, because with your personality, you've most likely inherited the emperor's teachings. You've used the same trick to trick others, but you're even better than that. Prince Mo blinked and leaned closer to his wife. Wife, are you praising your husband? I'm not praising you. The little crown princess glanced at him and moved to the side. Prince Mo didn't mind. He moved closer to her and lifted a corner of the curtain. Seeing that the sunlight was quite good, he rolled up the curtain. The sunlight shone into the carriage and fell on everyone's body, making them feel warm and cozy. Lord Guangguang squeezed beside Kong Kong and hurriedly asked, Where are you taking Lord Guangguang? When he saw Qiao Mu, he actually very much wanted to approach her. However, Crown Prince Mo was glaring at him like a tiger eyeing its prey, so Guangguang could only sit obediently next to Kong Kong, not daring to move at will. Won't we know when we get there? Little Monkey snapped at Little Baldy. These 2 bald Mo-brain fellows were really annoying. Sometimes, when they were long-winded, one blowing and one singing, it made people want to stuff their mouths with a handkerchief. Kong Kong, they don't want to say. Why don't you tell this old man? Congealing Jing said to the little monk like an old man. Kong Kong shook his head and said seriously, This little monk is only hitching a ride. This little monk isn't sure where the destination is. Arbor was about to die from laughing at the 2 little rascals' conversation. He looked at them speechlessly. Turning to look at the large field outside the window, Arbor had a flash of inspiration. He suddenly said, We've been here before. Oh, I know. Your father hid my mother and the others in Half Moon Cliff's splendid mountain villa. Mo Lien smiled and nodded. Chapter 51:12. Jojo was right. When he heard the news, he couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. This time, if it wasn't for his father's amazing foresight, the Chiao family might have suffered even more. If his parents-in-law were injured or met with any mishap, Jojo would definitely be very upset. When Arbor and the others arrived near Half Moon Cliff, they could see thousands of acres of fertile land. The crops were growing well. Arbor remembered that the last time she came, she had secretly watered the fields with holy water. She also had the holy soil turn over the soil. Naturally, the farmers in this area were blessed. As for the farmers who planted crops for her, regardless of whether the harvest was good or not, their family would definitely be rich this year. Hey, this village seems to have expanded a lot compared to the last time we came here. Yes. Mo Lien smiled and nodded. The soil here nourishes the people. Many farmers have voluntarily migrated here. The number of people who have settled here has increased in the past year. Wife, there are a lot of people who want to rent the land in your hands. As long as his wife's fields were planted, they would always make a profit. Not only would the harvest be good, but no matter what crops were planted in the fields, they would always grow well. There was never much to worry about. In a year, the harvest was 8 to 10 times more than others. Which tenant wouldn't want to take the fertile land to plant? Moreover, Arbor's method of collecting land rent was quite humane. She took 40% of the rent, which was 10% less than other farmers' 50%. The income was 10 to 8 times more than other farmers. In this way, although these farmers only received 60% of the food, the harvest was 10 to 8 times more than other farmers. It was a great deal. In the beginning, this news was kept a secret. No one knew who was the one who spread it, but it soon spread from mouth to mouth. Everyone said that the Half Moon Cliff's fields were heavenly fields. Whatever they planted, they would grow well. Naturally, everyone wanted to take the Half Moon Cliff's fields. Groups of farmers migrated here and competed to take up the land. Arbor heard Mo Lien's words and nodded. She naturally knew that her fields were very different from other people's. It was just a few drops of holy water and a few pinches of holy land. This kind of vitality effect could be maintained for about 3 to 5 years. After 3 to 5 years, the holy water and holy land would have to continue to turn over the fields here to maintain it. The carriage had already reached the dirt road at the entrance of the village. Recently, the road had been paved with stone slabs, so there were piles of bluestone slabs on both sides of the road. In Arbor, when they were halfway along, a man suddenly appeared in front of them, and, without a word, fell down in front of them, and began to cry out in pain. The young Crown Prince Consort and His Highness the Crown Prince exchanged astonished glances. Kong Kong couldn't help but rush to their side and lean against the window to take a look. Umitba, he shouted, benefactress, this benefactor is lying in front of our carriage. Is he trying to extort money? Arbor's mouth twitched. She really didn't expect that there would still be people who dared to touch her porcelain. She reached out to touch her face. Could it be that my face looks a lot more benevolent? The Crown Prince laughed and reached out to hug his little wife. What are you saying? Jojo has always been a kind little immortal girl. The little monk sighed and shook his head. Benefactress is her husband. Aren't you afraid that the wind will cut your tongue? Chapter 51:13. Sir Guangguang hastily nodded in full agreement. How was this fierce woman kind-hearted or peaceful? She was clearly brimming with malice, and whoever she offended would suffer misfortune. Arbor swept a glance at the light-congealing mirror, and the latter shrunk its neck before hastily saying, this old man can go down and take a look for you guys to see what's going on. No need. Arbor cast him a sidelong glance. This guy was so proactive, so he probably had some little scheme in mind. He really couldn't miss a second of this little guy with a bellyful of evil tricks. Humph. Sir Guangguang sat upright and still with his hands on his knees, a hint of anger hanging on his small face. Woman, you don't believe this old man. The little monkey couldn't resist twitching his mouth. He tried to restrain himself, but he ultimately couldn't restrain himself and smacked that smooth little head of his. You shut up. You keep calling me this old man, this old man. You're just a freaking 3-year-old brat, yet you still have the nerve to call me this old man. He really wanted to slap this guy to death. His lousy mouth was full of seniority, making them all seem like his juniors. In reality, the light congealing mirror had indeed gone through several thousand or even tens of thousands of years of tempering before finally forming a holy weapon spirit. There was nothing wrong with him insisting on calling himself an old senior. It was just that this old senior's image was probably too infuriating. Sir Guangguang pursed his small mouth and glanced at the little monkey resentfully. He inwardly thought, why are human women so scary? These women beside me don't look like good people at all. Unfortunately, one had no choice but to lower one's head when living under someone else's roof. Sir Guangguang lamented ruefully. On the other side, the little stoic ignored him and gave Xiao Yi, who was driving the carriage, a look. Xiao Yi cheerfully jumped off the carriage and walked to the person lying on the ground in a few steps. He stretched out his long leg and kicked that guy. Hey, hey, hey. Get up, get up. I-oh, 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 I-oh. That person hugged his left leg and curled up, wailing like a ghost and howling like a wolf. This wailing attracted many of the village's women and children. Upon seeing the person lying on the ground, Aunt Li at the village entrance couldn't resist pursing her lips and revealing a contemptuous expression. Blind Wang, that scoundrel, is starting to extort people again. That's right. He just extorted a sickly madam here an hour ago. He must have gotten used to it. Now, he wants to extort another sum of money. TSK, TSK. That madam is kind-hearted. She spent money to avoid disaster. But look at the young man driving the carriage. TSK, TSK. He is really spirited. Who knows how things will develop today? That's right, that's right. It's time for Blind Wang to hit a wall and kick an iron plate. Otherwise, he'll really think that no one in this world can defeat him. Arbor was stunned and glanced at her husband. Who would come earlier than us? Has the news that mother is here been found out? Mo Lien smiled. Last night, Imperial Father sent someone to inform father-in-law and mother-in-law that the danger has been averted. It seems that my father-in-law and mother-in-law have made quite a few friends while we were away. Arbor was delighted on the inside and nodded. Mother's life is too monotonous. It's good to make some friends. She then creased her brows. This scoundrel lives in Half Moon Cliff's village, but he extorted mother's friends. Other people who don't know will think that our family is like this. It's too disrespectful. Mo Lien sneered, her icy voice passing through the curtain. Are you getting up or not? Chapter 51:14. Blind Wang, who was lying on the ground pretending to be unconscious, only heard a cold voice enter his ears. His body trembled for no reason. He felt that this person's voice was a little scary. It was like a sharp blade that could cut through his body with just the sound of the voice. He did want to get up, but he was unwilling to do so. An hour ago, he had done the same thing, lying in front of the madam's carriage and easily earning 30 spirit coins. Looking at the magnificence of this carriage today, it was even better than that madam's carriage. Shouldn't rich people like them be the most afraid of trouble and be generous? When encountering such a small matter, most of them would just give some spirit coins and chase the person away. Who would have thought that the next sentence from that cold voice would be like 5 bolts of lightning crashing down on him? If you don't want to get up, then don't ever get up. Mo Lien's voice did not fluctuate in the slightest as she ordered emotionlessly. Xiao Yi laughed mischievously. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and he stretched out his leg to step on this scoundrel's calf. Crack, crack. Two sounds were heard. This scoundrel immediately shed the truest tears. He cried and hugged his leg, rolling left and right, back and forth on the ground, howling. This time, the ghostly wails and howls sounded much more realistic. After all, this time his leg was really broken. Those women who were watching the show were all shocked and hurriedly avoided the eaves. Arbor and Mo Lien got out of the carriage and walked down expressionlessly. When the onlookers saw this, they were immediately shocked. Their gazes could not help but focus on the two of them. They had completely forgotten about Blind Wang. Poor Blind Wang, who had been eating and waiting for death all his life, swindled and swindled everywhere. Today, he suffered a great crime. His two legs hurt so much that he could not stop howling. Arbor asked expressionlessly, "Is there no one in charge of these villages? Who can move in just because they want to?" When Xiao Yi saw the little crown princess's expression, he knew that things were going to get worse. He hurriedly replied, "This subordinate will call Manager Fong of Splendid Villa over. Logically speaking, the villages near Half Moon Cliff should be managed by Manager Fong and the nannies in charge. Since there was such a scoundrel who blocked their path and extorted them, they naturally could not absolve themselves from the blame." However, there was no need for Xiao Yi to pass the message. Steward Fong brought 3 to 5 steward older female servants and hurried over. Steward Fong was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. When he received the news that the blind scoundrel king had stopped the crown princess carriage, he felt as if the sky was about to collapse. It was one thing for Blind Wang to cause trouble normally, but today, he was so blind that he dared to cause trouble in front of His Highness the Crown Prince and that young mistress. Just how reckless was he to do that? Arbor stared coldly at Steward Fong, who was wiping his sweat. "Whose relative is this? Come out now. If you don't step forward now, you'll have to bear the consequences when I find out who your relative is." Steward Fong and the others could not help but shudder. The last time he met the young crown princess, there was no conflict, and the crown prince and his wife had only rested at Half Moon Cliff for a short period of time. Therefore, strictly speaking, as servants, they had not really come into contact with the crown prince and the crown princess. This time, they had truly witnessed how terrifying these two were. Just looking at how Blind Wang was being taught a lesson and rolling around on the ground, they felt a chill run down their spines. "No one will step forward," the young crown princess said coldly and moved her finger slightly. Chapter 51:15. She was already holding a dictum talisman in her hand. "I'll remind you one last time," the little stoic said icily, "after this crown princess finds out the truth, he, his relatives, and all of you who are covering up for him will be treated equally. All of you will be judged guilty." Plop, plop. Manager Fong and the others all knelt on the ground weakly. A plump elderly nanny wailed as she rolled out from behind Manager Fong. Unable to bear the pressure, she repeatedly kowtowed and admitted her guilt. "Your Highness the Crown Prince, please spare my life. Crown Princess, please spare my life." It was this old servant didn't know the severity of the matter and left my nephew here. This elderly nanny was filled with regret. Of all the people this Blind Wang could extort, he just had to extort this stoic crown princess. Although they were far away in Splendid Villa, they had also heard of the crown princess's reputation in the capital. Arbor looked at Manager Fong with a sneer. "Out of trust, this crown princess gave you full authority to manage this manor and farmland, but what happened in the end? What did you give this princess in return?" Manager Fong was drenched in cold sweat, and his back was completely soaked by it. He hastily kowtowed several times in succession, and each time, he kowtowed heavily until he bled. He didn't dare to be the slightest bit negligent, indecisive and improper in handling matters. The little crown princess coldly gave him a forward evaluation. I think you don't need to continue being a manager. Manager Fong nearly collapsed on the ground. He hastily crawled forward and repeatedly pleaded while sobbing, reporting to the crown princess, it was this old servant's fault. It was this old servant was soft-hearted and agreed to elderly Nanny Wang's request. This old servant won't dare to do it again in the future. May the crown princess give this old servant another chance, woo-woo. The plump elderly Nanny Wang was filled with regret, but Manager Fong was so regretful that his intestines were about to turn green. At that time, when old lady Wang had begged him, he really didn't want to keep blind Wang, this idler, here. This person couldn't carry anything on her shoulders and didn't do any decent work. She was like a piece of rat excrement, stirring in the soup all day long. She often extorted a chicken or a duck from the host family and lived on Nanny Wang's monthly salary. Originally, he didn't want to let him stay, but Nanny Wang cried bitterly with snot and tears. She said that she would have to rely on this nephew to take care of her in the future. Steward Fong's heart softened for a moment, causing today's calamity. He was so regretful that he wished he could slap himself to death for making the decision that day. How could he bear to throw away such a lucrative job as the head manager of the splendid villa? As the chief steward, he had a monthly salary of 15,000 spirit coins. In addition, there were also countless gifts that he received during festivals. The most important thing was that other families might not be able to grow their crops and lack food. However, they had all kinds of food in their residence and would not lack food at all. Half Moon Cliff's vast fields were now famous throughout the entire Divine Continent. Everyone couldn't help but envy the farmers at the foot of Half Moon Cliff. They envied them for being able to get such a good job and live a prosperous life. They never had to suffer from hunger. When Steward Fong thought of this, he cried bitterly and became more agitated. How could he lose his title as a steward? Even if he had to die, he had to keep this job. Crown Princess, this old servant knows his mistake. May the Crown Princess give this old servant another chance to redeem himself. Steward Fong cried and cried. The young Crown Princess coldly ordered, go and invite Manager Hu of Kaidai Pavilion here. Chapter 51:16. Have shopkeeper who temporarily take over splendid mountain villa, as well as all the farmlands within 100 kilometers of this place. When Manager Fong heard this, his entire body collapsed to the ground, and he kept thinking, it's over, it's over, it's over, it's over, it's over. It seems that today's matter can't be settled peacefully. The little Crown Princess is going to remove my title as manager and find someone else to replace it. Steward Fong felt a chill in his heart. With a miserable expression, he looked at Wang Momo, who had fallen to the side, and couldn't help but grumble, I told you to discipline your nephew properly. Truly, a loving mother spoils her son. This time, it's really because of you. Senior servant Wang had long been scared silly, and she didn't know how to react for a long time. Manager Fong braced himself and stammered as he cried, Crown Princess, please give this old servant another chance. This Half Moon Cliff is surrounded by thousands of acres of fertile land, and there are several hundred farmlands. These matters, the new manager definitely won't be able to take care of them all at once. This old servant is willing to atone for my sins by meritorious service, and wholeheartedly help that manager. Also, Crown Princess, please don't expel this old servant from Splendid Mountain Villa. When he spoke of the pitiful part, Manager Fong couldn't help but sob bitterly. Arbor glanced at him and considered for a long time before nodding and saying, since that's the case, then you can stay and properly learn how to manage from shopkeeper Hu. Arbor said coldly, the manager this princess wants is someone who can manage matters and people, and someone who can help this princess share her burdens. And not someone who blindly acts as a good old man, selling this face and that favor. This princess doesn't have that many favors to sell to you. After experiencing this matter, how would Manager Fong dare to sell any face or favor? He nodded repeatedly and cried out, "Yes, yes, this old servant will definitely properly correct and properly learn, and definitely won't disappoint the Crown Princess expectations. As for you." Arbor glanced coldly at Senior Servant Wang. "Take your rascal nephew and scram far away. Don't let this Crown Princess see you again." Old Maid Wang immediately collapsed to the ground. She couldn't figure out how such a small matter of extortion could escalate to such a high level. The little Crown Princess was so unreasonable that it was almost frightening. The remaining female stewards of Splendid Villa didn't even dare to breathe loudly. They all shrunk their heads and knelt behind Steward Fong. Their heads were lowered like frosted eggplants, crooked and smacking their lips. Arbor coldly glanced at them. Kai Xiu, who was in the other carriage, immediately came forward and bowed. "Go with the nanny in charge and check the accounts of these days." "Yes." Kai Xiu raised her hand and led 3 to 5 palace maids who were very nimble. She quickly walked to the front of the ashen-faced steward Mama and said indifferently, "Mama, please. We still have to check the accounts for nearly half a year today. Don't let the masters wait too long." The Mama trembled as she stood up and nodded repeatedly. She didn't dare to make a sound and hurriedly left with Kai Xiu and the others. When the two people got on the carriage again, there was silence all around. Even the villagers who were watching the show didn't dare to make a sound. The carriage drove towards the main gate of Splendid Mountain Villa in silence. Manager Fong and the others also didn't dare to complain and trotted all the way to follow. "Mother, which court do they live in?" In a flash, the carriage stopped at the main gate of Splendid Mountain Villa. Arbor asked with a cold face as she was led out of the carriage by Prince Mo. Chapter 51-17. An old nanny with a proper appearance hurried forward and bowed. She said respectfully, "Master and Madam are currently living in Silver Heron Courtyard." "Your Highness, Crown Princess, please." The nanny didn't dare to be negligent. She lowered her head and trotted forward to lead the way. Not long after, she led Arbor's party to a garden. There were 2 rows of pomegranate trees in front of the door. From the angle of the head, the garden was quiet and elegant. It seemed that Steward Fong and the others didn't dare to neglect father and mother. Sir Jojo pulled Prince Mo and quickly walked through the flower-shaped arch of Silver Heron Courtyard. They saw the pavilion not far from the entrance. Wei Ziqin was sitting opposite a middle-aged woman, drinking tea and chatting. Thick cotton curtains were hung around the pavilion, blocking a lot of the wind. Wei Ziqin had her back to them. The middle-aged woman sitting opposite her had a sickly look and her face was a little sallow. From the perspective of Arbor's doctors, the initial judgment was that this madam's condition was probably caused by spleen deficiency or dampness. Of course, there were some hidden toxins that could cause a person's complexion to be sallow and weak. She might gasp for breath after taking 2 steps. The servant girl, Xia Yun, was holding some tea and snacks. Just as she was about to enter the pavilion, she saw the little Crown Princess and the others walking over. Xia Yun's hands trembled and she knelt down. She cried out in surprise, "Madam, His Highness the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess are back." Wei Ziqin hurriedly turned her head and immediately stood up with a face full of joy. "Little Mo and Jojo are back. Why didn't you inform us in advance?" Wei Ziqin hurriedly walked out of the pavilion and raised her hand to hold her daughter with a smile. "You went to Wangchuan for too long this time. Mother has been waiting for the stars and the moon at home. Finally, you two are back. Xiao Xiao, you must be tired from the long journey with Xiao Mo." Arbor shook his head. "It's all right." She was definitely tired, and there were many dangers along the way. Thinking about what happened in the River of Forgetfulness, the Emperor did not tell her mother and the others about it. Since that was the case, then there was no need to talk about it. In any case, the matter of the River of Forgetfulness had already passed. Telling them about those dangerous situations would only increase their worries. Jojo, Murphy, did your trip to Forgotten River go smoothly? Arbor nodded again expressionlessly. Not bad. Prince Mo almost laughed out loud. His wife's words were so funny. His mother-in-law wanted to chat with her for a while more, but she felt that she couldn't continue the conversation. Seeing Wei Zichin's speechless expression, Prince Mo hurriedly added, this time, the River of Forgetfulness was quite smooth. We formed the Killer Heavenly Fate battle group and requisitioned an unnamed island in the River of Forgetfulness. The battle group has developed quite well. Also, Jojo became the owner of the island. The scenery in the River of Forgetfulness is not bad. After the 4 seas have calmed down, we can bring father-in-law and mother-in-law to the island to stay for a while. Just treat it as a vacation. Wei Zichin was a little dumbfounded. Her daughter went out for a spin and became the owner of some island. Didn't she just become the head of the Mu family not long ago? So soon, she became the owner of some island. Jojo nodded with a serious expression. Suddenly, the corner of his mouth twitched. Mother, I have good news to tell you. You're going to be a grandmother soon. For a moment, Wei Zichin thought that there was something wrong with her ears. She looked at her daughter in surprise and joy. After a long while, she found her excited voice again. Daughter, you. Her gaze shifted to her belly, and she couldn't help but cry out in joy. Daughter, you're pregnant. Chapter 51:18. Wei Zichin alternated between joy and worry. Jojo, why aren't you staying in the estate? If there's anything, just have someone inform me. The little stoic waved her hand and said, Mom, I'm very good. Our family's baby Mo is very obedient and doesn't make a fuss at all. As she spoke, this fellow even lightly patted her stomach. Wei Zichin couldn't help but feel melancholy and worried again. Her daughter still had a childish temper, but she was about to give birth to a child. Wei Zichin was worried and happy at the same time. She was worried and happy at the same time. Her emotions fluctuated up and down, and it was indescribably satisfying. Aya, look at me. I was so engrossed in talking with you that I forgot to introduce you. This is the Countess of Huainan, a new friend that mother made. Wei Zichin felt very apologetic for neglecting the guests because she was preoccupied with chattering with her daughter and son-in-law earlier. The Countess of Huainan walked forward and respectfully bowed towards Mo Yen and Arbor. This subject greets Your Highness the Crown Prince and Her Highness the Crown Princess. Prince Mo had always put on an amiable, little white rabbit appearance in front of his mother-in-law. Therefore, no matter how tyrannical this fellow was outside, in front of Wei Zichin, Qiao Zhongbang, and the others, he always pretended to be as gentle as a spring breeze and treated people kindly. Wei Zichin always felt that her son-in-law's temperament was especially good. She often worried that he wouldn't be able to suppress those native officials of the divine prefecture when he went out to handle matters. She also frequently reminded her daughter to not always bully little Mo for not having a temper and not always exploit little Mo. Sir Jojo's ears were about to grow calluses from listening to her. This fellow was accustomed to putting on an act in front of his mother-in-law, and Sir Jojo had repeatedly expressed his disdain for him. At this time, Prince Mo smiled very amiably again with a gentle expression. He warmly said to the Countess of Huainan who was curtsying, Madam doesn't need to be so courteous. You are my mother-in-law's friend, which makes you my elder. You may rise. Jojo secretly looked at her husband with disdain. Mother was always worried about little Mo's nice guy personality. He would probably be at a disadvantage outside. However, her little Mo's personality was completely different from the one he displayed in front of her. Madame Count Huainan lightly coughed twice, stood up straight with a smile, and said, Today, this subject's wife specially came to deliver the invitation to Sister Wei. Since the invitation has been delivered, I won't disturb Your Highness family reunion any longer. Wei Ziqin smiled and said, I'm sorry for the neglect. Madam, you came all the way here and you're leaving so soon. Let me see you off. When Wei Ziqin returned from escorting the Countess of Huainan, she saw her son-in-law standing alone in front of the pavilion, looking at her pitifully with his beautiful phoenix eyes. Wei Ziqin's heart softened, and she hurriedly walked up and asked, Little Mo, where's Jojo? Why are you here alone? Jojo went to see his sister-in-law, Xiao Yao. It was naturally inappropriate for a man like him to go over. His little wife turned hostile and heartlessly left him here, minding her own business and walking away. Mo, Little Monkey, Kong Kong, and Guang Guang were also following him. If he were to drag them along, wouldn't he be all by himself? Wei Ziqin was a bit amused, but when she saw her son-in-law's pitiful appearance, she felt a bit sorry for him. She hurriedly said, Your father and second uncle will be back soon. Mother will take you to the front yard to sit for a while. Jojo shouldn't be looking at you for too long. He'll be out soon. Tomorrow, I'll catch up on 2 more chapters. Chapter 51-19. In the end, little Mo accompanied his father-in-law and second uncle and chatted for more than 2 hours, but his wife still didn't come over. His heart was filled with grievances and melancholy. Don't mention it. His wife abandoned him and went to chat with his sister-in-law for such a long time. She wasn't a chatty person. It was most likely that Xiao Yao had nothing better to do and kept chatting with his wife. Arbor and Xiao Yao hadn't seen each other for a long time. Now that they were talking about babies, they really couldn't stop. It must have been hard on Mo Roa, this rash fellow, to wander back and forth in the room like a wandering soul. Although he didn't understand, he didn't disturb the 2 sisters-in-law's conversation. The little crown princess had already taken Xiao Yao's pulse earlier. As a martial artist, her physique was stronger than ordinary people. However, she was still a little weak after giving birth. As long as she had a good rest and paid attention to her diet, she would be fine. She didn't need to take medicine to recuperate. After Qiao Mu finished taking Xiao Yao's pulse, she was fortunately unruffled as she took her own pulse. Xiao Yao saw her frown slightly and couldn't help but be on tenterhooks. Crown Princess, are you feeling unwell? Arbor shook her head. This was what she felt the most strange. Logically speaking, there would always be some changes in the body after pregnancy. Take Peony for example. She was a girl who was full of vigor before, but after pregnancy, she would also have some symptoms of pregnancy and would always be a little weak. But her. The little crown princess knew her body best. Not to mention that she didn't feel any weakness or pregnancy symptoms, there was nothing wrong with her. She was fine everywhere. She could still split mountains and seas with one punch. The most important thing was that every time she woke up, her body felt light and full of strength. She even inexplicably improved in her realm. She was too embarrassed to mention this to others. Now that she saw her sister-in-law, she didn't care so much about what she said. She simply dragged a stool and sat in front of Xiao Yao, carefully discussing some pregnancy matters with her. In the end, she even asked her with a serious face, Sister-in-law, do you feel that way? How do you feel? It's just that after sleeping, I always feel like my body is floating, as if I have an inexhaustible amount of strength, as if I can break seas and split mountains with a single punch. Her sister-in-law looked at her expressionlessly and said, No. The little stoic replied with an, Oh, and the 2 of them sank into a brief silence. After a while, Arbor couldn't help but ask, Then if you get pregnant, will your realm increase? What? At first, Xiao Yao thought that she had misheard, but when she saw the little crown princess's hopeful eyes, she was sure that she hadn't misheard. She replied expressionlessly, No. Only a weirdo would be like this. She could still increase her cultivation after getting pregnant. The little crown princess replied with an Oh. This time, even the little monk couldn't help but roll his eyes. Benefactress. Please listen to Xiao Na. Arbor turned her head and saw a pair of short legs sitting side by side on a brocade couch by the window. They both had a shiny bald head and stared straight at her with round eyes. "Speak if you have something to say." "Benefactress, although Xiao Na doesn't understand what you're saying, I feel that you're always comparing the strange things that happen to you with normal people. This is a very abnormal thing." Xiao Yao held back her laughter and nodded expressionlessly. "Crown Princess, Kong Kong is absolutely right. Although this child was long-winded, she always hit the nail on the head. This was exactly the reason." Chapter 51-20. The little crown princess always liked to compare the strange things that happened to her to other people. How could it be the same? Master Jojo ignored the little monk and subconsciously reached out to touch her belly. She muttered to herself, "Recently, I feel that my cultivation speed has sped up a lot. It's like I'm cultivating even when I'm sleeping." What's the reaction of a normal pregnancy? Normal people have some reaction in the first 3 months. Take me for example. Although my body is not bad, in the first month, when I smell meat, I feel a little nauseous and vomited. It's only after that I slowly get used to it. It's indeed written like that in the book. The little crown princess had a serious expression on her face as she nodded. But I don't seem to feel anything. I can sleep and run, and my appetite is especially good when it's time to eat. Xiao Yao resisted the urge to roll her eyes and continued expressionlessly, "When the fetus grows, I can't sleep well and even turn over will be a little difficult." Arbor made an "oh" sound and touched her belly. "Then it's probably because I'm still young. In the future, the situation described in the book will probably happen." "Xiao Yao, Crown Princess, have you read a lot of medical books?" The little crown princess nodded with a serious expression. She clasped her hands and said, "I don't have much experience. The crown prince is a man. He won't understand this kind of thing even if you ask him. I can only read more books and find some experience on my own. The book also says that during pregnancy, you have to pay attention to moving around more. It will be easier for you to give birth in the future." Speaking of this, she was a little distressed. "My symptoms are completely different from what the book says. Every time I check my pulse, it's always very normal. But there are some situations that I feel are a little abnormal." Xiao Yao originally wanted to laugh, but her expression gradually became serious. There was a hint of admiration in her eyes. Thinking about it, the little crown princess was looking forward to this child. She was so cautious and full of anticipation for this child. Thinking of this, Xiao Yao could not help but reach out to hold her hand. "Jojo, although our situations are somewhat different, as someone who has been through it, I have some experience to impart to you. Don't let your imagination run wild when you're free. If there's anything you don't understand or want to ask, feel free to look for me. Previously, when you were in the river of forgetfulness, there was no one close to take care of you. Now that you're home, we're all here. Even if I can't answer some of your questions, you can ask your mother. Eldest aunt's experience is definitely more abundant. Auntie helped me a lot when I gave birth to the baby tigers this time. Thank you for your hard work." Xiao Yao was deeply moved. She was so lucky to be able to marry into the Qiao family. Now, her husband treated her like a pearl and treasure, and her parents-in-law treated her exceptionally well. Living in harmony with each other, this is what a wonderful life is like. Arbor patted the back of her hand. Little Tiger was the pet name of Xiao Yao's son. Because when he was born, his cries were very loud and resonated throughout the entire residence. Second Uncle Qiao Zhongxing laughed heartily and decided on the spot to give him the pet name Little Tiger. At this time, it was almost noon. After the two talked for a while, Little Tiger woke up a little and started to make a fuss in a small voice. "Does he wake up every half an hour now?" Xiao Yao nodded. "Little Tiger is fine. He doesn't make a fuss. Sometimes, he sleeps for half an hour. He only makes a fuss when he's hungry and pees. Adult Jojo raised his hand and touched the child's soft face. Chapter 51-21. The little tiger was considered larger among the infants. His small face was wrinkled, and his eyes were closed. His small mouth was faintly opening and closing. When I was young, when Long Chuyun gave birth to me, I might not even be as strong as the little tiger. Arbor thought to herself as she stroked baby Mo in her stomach. Baby Mo was like a small ball of fire. Even through his stomach, he could feel the fiery aura that was being emitted. Just like his dad, Arbor thought to herself. His dad was like a small stove. Hugging him in the middle of winter was like hugging a hot potato. He was hot everywhere and couldn't be thrown away. Once thrown away, he would act cute, act coquettishly, and roll around. Humph! If Prince Mo could hear his wife's thoughts right now, he would definitely be angered into laughter by the little fellow. When he hugged her in the middle of winter, he would always ask her very considerately, "Is it warm?" If the little stoic answered, "The temperature is okay," then he would maintain his body temperature. If the little stoic answered, "It doesn't seem warm enough," then he would adjust his body temperature even higher. Was it easy to be a husband? Now, he was even being disdained by his wife, saying that he was like a hot potato. It was almost noon now. Sir Jojo finally remembered that he left his husband at the small pavilion in the middle courtyard and ran off with the group of little radishes. It should be almost 2 hours now. With this guy's personality, he must be secretly complaining about her in his mind. Perhaps he would even quietly curse her as a little liar. Arbor pursed her small mouth. Just as she was about to stand up and bid farewell, she saw Tsaishio come in to report about the account book. "Crown Princess, you can go ahead if you have something to attend to," Xiaoyao hastily said. The little Crown Princess nodded and left behind a prescription for tonics before calling Tsaishio out. After they walked far away and confirmed that they wouldn't disturb Xiaoyao's rest, Arbor then asked unhurriedly, "How was it?" Tsaishio nodded and said, "The nanny in charge is quite well behaved and didn't make any big moves. She only took some small advantages in some places. Based on her understanding of the little Crown Princess, she was not a petty person. She would not make a fuss over such a trivial matter. The steward nannies were really smart people. If they went overboard and really lost a lot of things, then they would be in big trouble today." Arbor nodded. Just as Kai Xiao had expected, he didn't take this matter to heart. "Since there's no problem with the accounts, let's find these nannies and talk to them one by one. I don't want people like old Madame Wang to appear again." The little Crown Princess said coldly, "I've never run a charity. Those who had the ability to do things were welcome. Those who just wanted to enjoy the shade under a big tree, or the fox who used the tiger's might to cause trouble for her, should scram as far away as possible." Kai Xiao immediately understood and nodded. "This servant will do it now. There's no need to rush." The little Crown Princess shook her head and said, "Let's go and eat first. We'll stay here for the next 2 days. There's no need to rush." Rules had to be set, but there was no need to rush. Since she had decided to reorganize all the farmlands and farmers around Half Moon Cliff, Arbor naturally had to stay here and tidy things up slowly. However, while she was on her way to the Half Moon Cliff, the old monk was still waiting in the Eastern Palace for her to return. After asking around, he finally found out where she went. He hurriedly mounted his horse and rushed to the west of the city with a dark expression. She was not in good spirits. Tomorrow at 3 in the afternoon and 4 in the evening. She would try to finish it. It was too difficult. Chapter 51-22. The old monk had a knot in his heart. Although he rode his horse towards the west of the city, he still hadn't thought of how to tell the little Crown Princess about this matter. Whenever he thought of King Duo Luo's arrogant manner, the old monk couldn't help but frown. In the end, he still sped up and flew towards Half Moon Cliff's splendid mountain villa. Now that things had come to this, the little monk's identity couldn't be concealed anymore. Fortunately, he had made a wise decision and sent the little monk to the Qiao family at the first opportunity. These few years had passed smoothly. He knew that this day would eventually come. During lunch, his husband kept looking at him with his small eyes. Sir Jojo thought about it and decided to pacify him. Sigh, men. He was about to become a father, yet he still acted like a child. Sir Jojo expressed that he would definitely worry more in the future. Mo Lian's mouth twitched slightly. He could see some clues from his wife's strange expression. His wife was probably ridiculing him in her heart. Come, come, come. Sit down and eat. Xiao Zhongbang gestured for everyone to sit down. Xiao Sen and Lin were still in closed-door cultivation, so they didn't come out. The 10 people at the table randomly found a seat and sat down. Mo floated by the side. Xiao Zhongbang happily smiled at second uncle. Lao, do you want to drink? No problem. Second uncle chuckled in response. Madame Ren pursed her lips and tugged at her husband's sleeve. This fella who passed out in 2 Tails always thought that he could drink a lot, but every time, he would fall asleep at the table. It had to be said that it was really hilarious. Xiao Zhongbang laughed. Sister-in-law, drinking is just a formality. Just let second brother take a few sips and he won't faint again. Madame Ren giggled and nodded. Today, our family is reunited. We have another happy addition to our family. Xiao Zhongbang cleared his throat. Just as he was about to speak loudly, he heard Wei Ziqin cough lightly. He turned to look at his wife and laughed. Madam, do you have something to say? Wei Ziqin nodded and smiled until her eyes turned into crescents. It's rare for all of us to gather together. Our Qiao family has been having a lot of happy events recently. What do you think, old master? That's good. Xiao Zhongbang laughed and said, it's all up to you. Madame Ren smiled shyly, I'm sorry for troubling you. We're all family. What's there to be troubled about? You just focus on taking care of Xiao Yao and the little tiger. Leave the 100-day banquet to me. Madame Ren nodded repeatedly and said with a smile, it's not a big deal for me to take care of my daughter-in-law and grandson. Eldest sister-in-law is busy with the 100-day banquet, so just remember to send me around. There's nothing to be busy about. Wei Ziqin smiled and said, it's mostly the servants who do it. I just have to move my mouth. Everyone chatted and laughed. After 3 rounds of wine, Wei Ziqin turned to look at her daughter sitting beside her. Jojo, are you tired? The crown prince, who was peeling prawn balls for his wife, quickly nodded and said, Jojo, I can't sit anymore. Let's go back to the room first. Pooh. She was just sitting and eating. How was she so delicate that she couldn't even sit down to eat? Arbor rolled her eyes at her husband in annoyance. She turned and hesitated for 2 seconds before saying to her mother, Mother, actually, I don't feel anything. Wei Ziqin, sister-in-law, also said that the body will feel more tired in the later stages of pregnancy, but I feel. Chapter 51-23. Arbor even paused when he said this. The whole family simultaneously looked at her, only to hear the little stoic say in deadly earnest, she probably won't feel anything. The little monk nodded in all apparent seriousness. You can't look at benefactress through a normal person's eyes. Compared to normal people, benefactress is very abnormal. The whole family speechlessly looked at each other. Although the little monk's words were very reasonable, his adorable expression was too indecent. Coco lovingly wanted to pinch his chubby little cheeks. The little monkey was the first to pinch Kongkong's little cheeks. The little monk instantly leaned back and said, Amitba. Benefactress, please don't get touchy with this little monk. This little monk is a person wholeheartedly devoted to Buddha and won't be tempted by the mundane. Arbor, The little monkey rolled his eyes at him and poked at the plate of vegetables in front of him. Being a monk is boring to death. You can't eat meat or drink wine. Only an oddball like you would like to be a monk. If the heavens gave you a chance to renounce asceticism, would you renounce asceticism? I wouldn't. The little monk decisively refused, a stiff expression appearing on his soft and puffy face. The mundane world is full of worries. Tempering one's heart in the secular world also requires great perseverance. This little monk doesn't want to be annoyed to the point of going bald. Everyone was utterly speechless. The little monkey even rolled his eyes repeatedly. Brother, you don't have any hair on your head right now. You don't want to go bald, but you make it seem like you aren't bald now. Just as everyone was silent, the little stoic concluded, everyone has their own aspirations. Everyone walks their own path, so who knows what will happen in the future. Xiao Zhongbang and his wife resisted the urge to laugh and nodded. Come, don't say these depressing words. Let's eat. The crown prince continued to peel shrimp balls and feed his wife, and they ate the meal in harmony. After the meal, everyone was idle, so they gathered in the living room and casually asked about the trip to Wangchuan. How could Arbor tell them everything that had happened in the Forgotten River? However, Xiao Zhongbang and Wei Ziqin were not stupid either. They realized that every time they asked Jojo about the Long family, Jojo would subconsciously change the topic. Over time, the couple also understood. It must be that the trip to Forget River was not as smooth as Jojo had described. At the very least, the process would not be easy. Wei Ziqin couldn't help but ask, Jojo, did something unpleasant happen between you and the Wangchuan Dragon clan? Jojo-sama once again passed the important task of speaking to Jojo's lotus. The latter hurriedly added, Mother, don't worry. It's not a big deal. There were some small problems along the way, but it's all solved now. The Forgotten River Dragon clan had even chosen a different clan head. The situation had changed so quickly that people could not help but sigh. In fact, if it weren't for Long Qian's stubbornness, Wangchuan's ending might not have been like this. Wei Ziqin knew that her son-in-law did not tell them the whole story, but she also knew that the young couple liked to report only the good news and not the bad news. They tried their best to erase some dangerous things and only pick some harmless happy things to tell them. This was also the children's filial piety, and they did not want them to worry about it afterward. Since that was the case, she knew better than to ask any more questions. While the family was talking, the maid, Xiaoyan, rushed in and bowed. Your Highness, Crown Princess, Master, Madam, there is a monk outside who wishes to see your Highness and the Crown Princess. Chapter 51-24. Monk? Everyone couldn't help but stare blankly. The little monk Kong Kong, who was using a small spoon to drink soup, touched his bald head with his other hand and asked curiously, a monk like me? Xiaoyan stifled her laughter and nodded. The master said his name is Kong Yin. Arbor and Mo Lien looked at each other and stood up. Let's go out and take a look. Jojo, did something happen? Wei Ziqin also stood up worriedly. Arbor hurriedly comforted her. It's nothing, mother. Master Kong Yin is the great elder of the Elder Compound. He should be here because something happened at the Elder Compound and he needs my husband's help to deal with it. Sir Jojo casually came up with an excuse and said it very smoothly. When Wei Ziqin heard this, she put away her slightly nervous emotions and nodded. Then let little Mo go and meet this master quickly. Don't tell me it's something important. Benefactress, this little monk will go with you. When the little monk heard that Master Kong Yin was here, he naturally couldn't sit still. He stomped down to the ground and scampered outside after Qiao Mu and Mo Lien. Arbor only stopped after he left the dining hall and waited for the short-legged little monk. Although the little monk's legs were short, his martial arts weren't weak and his speed wasn't slow. In just a moment, the little guy ran up and asked with a pair of big black and white eyes, Benefactress, carry me on your back. Arbor was a little amused and was about to speak when he saw Mo Lien pick up the little monk first. "Alright, let's go." The little monk angrily opened his big round eyes and shouted angrily, "I don't want you, I don't want you. This little monk wants benefactress to carry me. This stinky man always liked to carry him around. He wasn't a cabbage." As usual, Mo Lien completely ignored the child's complaints and walked out with Arbor. When they arrived at the entrance of the side hall, they saw the old monk Kong Yin from afar. He was dressed in a grey robe. His back was facing the two of them. He was pacing back and forth under a tree not far away. "Old monk." The little stoic faintly called out to his back. Kong Yin hurriedly turned her head back with a look of joy on her face. "Your Highness the Crown Prince, Crown Princess, it's great to see both of you. Why are you looking for us?" The little stoic asked expressionlessly, "If you want us to contribute money to support the elderly home, then don't open your mouth." Mo Lien, the old monk's mouth twitched, and he glared indignantly at the little stoic. "You must have earned a lot from your trip to the River of Forgetfulness. So what if you sympathize with us old folks and allocate some funds to the elder courtyard?" The little stoic chuckled and didn't continue speaking. However, the old monk suddenly turned around and hastily said, "Jojo, I came to find you this time because there is indeed an important matter." This little crown princess was truly someone who was used to interrupting. After being interrupted by her just now, he almost forgot what he wanted to say. As he spoke, his gaze landed on the little monk on the side. The little monk's eyes brightened. "Master, are you bringing this little monk back? What the hell was this little monk address?" The old monk's eyes twitched before he shook his head seriously. "No." "Oh." The little monk immediately drooped his small head in disappointment. Upon seeing this, the old monk hastily asked, "Do you want to return to the monastery with Master?" Chapter 51-25. That's not impossible. It's just that once you return to the temple, you'll have to separate from the benefactress. Are you willing then? The little monk immediately shakes his head like a rattledrum, hopping off the ground and even shrinking behind Mo Lien. Great Master Kong Yin can't help but find it somewhat funny. He turns to look at Arbor and says, "This old monk has come this time to bring Kong Kong to a place." Arbor raises his eyebrows, but doesn't say anything, only looking at him. The old monk then says again, "To the Supreme Court's dungeon." A moment later, Arbor and the old monk sit down alone in the side hall. The two's gazes simultaneously fall on the two people outside the window, one big and one small. At this moment, Mo Lien has already picked up the little ghost, patting his head. The little monk raises his small fist, arguing with him about something, his voice sometimes high and sometimes low. Arbor looks for a while, then retracts his gaze, landing it on the old monk again. "What did you mean by what you said just now? You want to bring the little monk to the Supreme Court's dungeon to meet someone?" Just as Crown Princess heard, this old monk has indeed come to bring the little monk to the Supreme Court's dungeon to meet someone. Arbor raises his eyebrows noncommittally. "The person you want the little monk to meet, is King Duoluo?" She thinks carefully, a few strands of suspicion slipping through her eyes. The gaze she uses to stare at the old monk also becomes more and more unfathomable. "You, from the moment you bumped into me in the long sparse forest's ancient temple, you've been scheming against me." "No, no. Crown Princess, you've misunderstood." The old monk hurriedly waves his hand and says, "This old monk has stayed in the long sparse forest's ancient temple for a few years. When I first saw a benefactress that day, I only thought that you looked very similar to Chu Yun. I really don't have any other thoughts. Even if you didn't have any thoughts at that time, after knowing my identity, you very naturally pushed the boat with the current and placed Kong Kong by my side." The old monk is silent for a moment, then nods. A monk doesn't make idle remarks. Benefactress has been an intelligent person since young, her mind is exquisite and clear, guessing correctly. After that, he purposely threw the little monk by the little crown princess's side, to keep her company. Firstly, to improve their relationship, he can definitely help his little disciple at a critical moment. Secondly, the little crown princess is very capable, naturally, she can protect the little monk. Xiao Mu waved her hand in front of his face. You old monk, you really have a good plan. What is the little monk's relationship with King Duoluo? In the end, Xiao Mu nonchalantly asked the old monk this question. Walking to enter the Supreme Court's dungeon to see a sea of bright orange bright yellow light. In the middle of the large iron cage, there were mighty lion and tiger totems carved on the iron pillars. Arbor to close to her to the point, Aaron's right to the point, Mo Lien raised his hand to pick him up. This time, the little monk doesn't resist. Instead, he hugs Mo Lien's arm and crawls into her embrace, his big eyes looking around vigilantly. Master, what is this place that we're in? The little monk suddenly asks. We're going down to meet someone. We're still going down. The little monk suddenly reaches out and hugs Mo Lien's neck, a trace of confusion and panic flashing through his eyes. If we go down, it'll be the 18th level of hell. Master, look at the wall, it's filled with all kinds of torture instruments, so scary. At the end of his words, his voice ripples. Arbor can't help but twitch the corner of her mouth. Chapter 51-26. The old monk was also somewhat speechless. He patiently explained to his little disciple, it's not the 18 levels of hell. Moreover, why would there be 18 or 19 levels of hell? Hell is not divided into levels. It's just a matter of areas. The old monk snorted and could not help but nag at his disciple. I told you to do more homework and not delay your studies, but you're used to slacking off. You haven't even comprehended 1/10,000th of the essence of Buddhism. Mischievous. Master, I do my morning and evening classes every day. If you don't believe me, you can ask the benefactress. Seeing the little monk pointing at her, the benefactress only had a blank expression. Don't you usually sit together for morning, afternoon, and evening classes and finish tomorrow's morning classes tonight? The old monk could not help but blow his beard and glare. You must be slacking off and sleeping. You can't even get up to do your morning classes. The little monk pursed his lips and hurriedly shrank his head back, not uttering a word. Master, benefactress's husband, can you tell me who you want me to meet? Meet your grandfather. Arbor pondered for a few seconds before telling the truth. This child's mental age was different from ordinary children. He naturally had the right to know about this matter. Unexpectedly, the little monk opened his mouth in shock. Xiao Na's grandfather. Xiao Na has a grandfather. How could he not have a grandfather? If he did not have a grandfather, where did his father come from? If he did not have a father, where did he come from? Arbor looked at the little fellow's dazed expression and could not help but raise his hand to pinch his little face. Yes, your grandfather is your grandfather. You are you. When you meet him later, don't believe anything he says. The little monk had a puzzled expression. He's a bad person. He's a traitor. Arbor nodded slightly. The little monk still understood the word traitor. A trace of shock appeared in his eyes. Don't tell me that rotten old man wants to drag Xiao Na down with him. Everyone, this child's ability to infer many things from one instance was too strong. They had not revealed much information to him yet, but this child actually saw through the mystery himself. Mo Lien carried the little monk and floated down to the bottom floor of the water prison. She patted the little monk's head and said, you don't have to be afraid of this person. Just answer him however you want. The little monk pursed his lips and replied with a noncommittal, oh. A pair of big watery eyes looked around curiously. When his line of sight fell on King Doro in the water prison, the little monk glanced at him and hurriedly turned his head away, subconsciously shrinking into Mo Lien's embrace. Bang! King Duo angrily smashed a few iron bars. He couldn't help but roar, "Come here. Why are you hiding in the arms of this enemy?" Little Monk was startled by his roar and instinctively hugged Prince Mo even tighter. What he saw was that the strange man in the water prison was really disheveled and dirty. Seeing the little monk hiding beside Mo Lien and refusing to get down, King Duo's old face turned red from anger. His entire body couldn't help but tremble slightly. This child in front of him was King Duo's grandson, his direct grandson. Yet, he was looking at him with apathetic eyes and hiding beside the enemy. After meeting for so long, he wasn't even willing to call him grandfather. Thinking of this, King Duo couldn't help but be furious. He shouted, "You're really my good grandson. You're exactly the same as your father." "Shut up." Sir Jojo coldly spat out 2 words, "There are still 2 more chapters to go. Even if I have something to do tomorrow, I probably won't be able to make it in time. I can return to normal on the 23rd. I'm going to sleep. Recently, the virus is wreaking havoc. I don't dare to stay up late. Everyone, pay attention to your protection." Chapter 51-27. You're a prisoner in prison. Why do you have so much nonsense to say? Arbor shouted coldly. When his gaze swept past King Doro, it paused for a moment. However, it only took one glance for King Doro to quiver all over, and a haze covered his face. "Junior, how dare you speak to this old man like this?" King Doro said furiously, "I request to speak with my grandson alone. You don't have the right to negotiate with us." Arbor flatly refused this person's request and said coldly, "If you have something to say, say it quickly. If you don't, you won't have another chance to say it in the future." A chill inexplicably arose in King Doro's heart. Of course, he knew who the person before him was. How could he not recognize the original form of Lily Er's plan and the core component of the entire plan? This young crown princess was rumored to be an extremely difficult person to get along with. It was said that her expression was apathetic and her methods were fierce, but seeing was believing. When King Doro saw this woman today, he felt that she seemed to be even more callous and ruthless than the rumored crown princess. What did she mean by saying those words just now? She meant that he, Mo Yoshi, wouldn't live past these few days, right? Ha! He, Mo Yoshi, had lived for so many years. What kind of storms and waves hadn't he seen? How could he be scared to the point that his legs went soft from mere threats from this ignorant brat? When he thought of this, King Doro resisted the urge to take a step back. He glared at Arbor in front of him and said word by word, "You can try. If this old man dies, then as this old man's grandson, crack." After a crisp sound, King Doro only realized that he had been whipped by a slender vine whip through the water cage when the back of his hand was hit by a heavy whip. This feeling was simply indescribable. King Doro, who had always been high and mighty, almost didn't dare to believe that this stoic-faced girl in front of him would use a whip at the slightest disagreement. Arbor's eyes carried some impatience. "If your goal is only to use the little monk's identity to threaten us, then there's no need for that. You can publicly reveal the little monk's identity." Arbor said coldly, "At that time, you can see whether the little monk is unlucky or you are more unlucky." King Duo's eyes revealed a trace of viciousness as he forcefully slapped the water cage. Even though the electric current scuttled through the back of his hand, he didn't feel the slightest bit of pain. "Aren't you afraid that the great emperor will blame you? Saying that the crown prince and his wife were raising the grandson of a rebel? When the time comes, the 2 of you will be held accountable for your crimes?" King Duo let out a cold laugh and said with a threatening tone, "Being too close to the grandson of a rebel is not a glorious thing in the end. You don't know." The young crown princess said expressionlessly, "On the way to the Supreme Court, the crown prince had already handed over a memorial stating that he wanted to adopt the little monk as his son." King Duo's face was filled with astonishment, unable to speak for a while. How the fuck did he know? He was locked up in this water prison, isolated from the rest of the world. What could he possibly know about the outside world? So you don't have to worry about it. From now on, Kong Kong will be the grandson of the great emperor. You. King Duo Luo had an incredulous expression. Because of his fury, even his voice trembled a bit. How is that possible? If the great emperor knew his true identity, how could he possibly allow the crown prince to adopt him? Could it be that you haven't heard? Wildfire sets the prairie ablaze. Chapter 51-28. If you still dare to keep the grandson of King Doro alive now, then 10 or 20 years later, you will definitely regret it. You will definitely regret it. Arbor sneered. You have no way of knowing whether others will regret it or not. But what I know now is that you will regret it immediately. You shouldn't have provoked me. You shouldn't have led us here. Arbor said coldly and suddenly raised a small porcelain bottle in his hand. What are you doing? Startled, King Doro subconsciously shrunk back. But he was surrounded in the water prison and the range was only so big. No matter how he retreated, it was impossible for him to escape the attack range of Arbor and the others. Amitba. The little monk muttered and turned to look at King Doro with a somewhat dazed expression. This old benefactor, the evil aura on your body is too heavy. If you carry evil in this life, you will definitely be unlucky in your next life. As someone who has been through this, I can't help but give you a word of advice. The heavens are watching what you do. It's not that the time hasn't come yet. When the time comes, you'll be finished. Everyone. Arbor's hand that was holding the porcelain bottle paused slightly and glanced at the little monk speechlessly. He saw the little guy's round eyes staring at King Doro in front of him. Once he started talking about teaching, he couldn't stop his nagging rhythm. Say, you're already so old, what are you after? What are you thinking, why do you want to rebel? Your rebellion will inevitably consume countless soldiers, sharpen and kill on the battlefield, plunge the people into misery and suffering, and anger the heavens. You failed. The little monk's face was solemn as he shouted crisply. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if you succeed in your rebellion, with your lifespan, you won't be able to live more than 3 years. What's the point of doing this? Why can't you think it through? You're already so old, what are you tormenting yourself for? Everyone. The old monk's mouth twitched as he secretly glanced at King Doro's face. Sure enough, the other party's face had already swelled to the color of pig liver. Thinking about it, the little monk's words were simply piercing and stabbing like knives. No matter who it was, they probably wouldn't be able to endure it, let alone King Doro who had always been proud and arrogant. Shut up. Why should I shut up? The small monk continued unhappily. Master said that there is a lack of people in this world who can speak out for justice. Me. Kong Kong is the one who inherited Master's legacy. The little monk said solemnly, this little monk will never yield to evil forces like you. King Duo Luo almost fainted from anger because of this little monk. Just thinking about it made him angry. Not only did he not gain any benefits from revealing Kong Kong's identity, he seemed to have completely offended the crown princess in front of him. He originally thought that by threatening Kong Yin with Kong Kong's identity, Kong Yin would think of a way to help him no matter what. Even if he couldn't get out of the water prison for the time being, it would be enough to let him keep his life. Who would have thought when the matter was revealed to the crown prince and the crown princess, the outcome was completely different from what he had expected. The most hateful thing was this little monk's mouth. He was obviously the grandson of King Duo Luo, but he kept saying some unpleasant words. You're called Kong Kong, right? King Duo Luo suppressed his bellyful of anger and reluctantly put on an amiable face as he faced the little monk Kong Kong. However, no matter how amiable his expression was, his face still looked a little awkward. Tomorrow at 12:04 p.m., 12:04 p.m., 12:04 p.m. To make up for these 2 days. Chapter 51-29. The little monk retorted expressionlessly, asking when you already know the answer. That's unnecessary. How could this sloppy old man in the water dungeon not have investigated his identity? Otherwise, how would he know that he was his grandson? Even now, he still pretended to ask for his name. Wasn't that asking when he already knew the answer? Everyone, this little imp's words were clear and logical, and he always liked to jump out with 4 words. His face was clearly adorable, but he still had to put on the appearance of a little adult lecturing. King Doro was so infuriated by him that he felt somewhat depressed. How could this child's words be so infuriating? If it weren't for the fact that he was currently imprisoned and couldn't move, he would really want to pull him over and give him a good beating. He was his grandfather. This child must have been led astray by that old bald thief Kong Yin, or perhaps he had been following the eccentric little crown princess for a long time and had been led astray. Otherwise, how could he have learned such a sharp-tongued way of retorting? Arbor shot him a glance and asked impatiently, "You called us here just for this?" King Doro was momentarily speechless. These people didn't follow his routine at all. How could he continue chatting happily with them? Then there's no need to talk anymore. King Doro's entire face was dark and gloomy. "Crown Princess, you'd better think clearly before you speak." The little Crown Princess cast him a sidelong glance with a bit of ridicule on her face. "Xiao Yi. Xiao Yi is here. Properly explain to him how a prisoner should behave." "Yes." Xiao Yi cupped his hands and turned around with quick steps. When he arrived in front of the water dungeon, he abruptly flung out a thick iron chain and wrapped it around King Doro's neck in an instant. King Doro was already on guard, but he was in a cage that was only so large and had no place to hide. After his neck was locked by the iron chain, he couldn't help but slide forward with the iron chain. With a snap, he was tightly stuck to the cage. The water dungeon was specially constructed so that once someone got close to it, it would recklessly emit gurgling electric currents. Previously, when King Doro slapped the cage, he only felt some pain from the electric current burning his hand. But now, it was different. His entire body was stuck to the cage. From top to bottom, from his torso to his limbs, he was suffering from the torment of the electric current. King Duoluo, who originally wanted to hold on, instantly let out a miserable howl. The young crown princess looked at the old man expressionlessly and continued to say coldly, "Don't say that we don't know how to respect the old and cherish the young. People like you are really unworthy. How could an old man who treated his children and grandchildren as tools for his career have the face to be called an elder?" In his mind, other than scheming, there was only scheming. Just like Long Qian, she didn't deserve anyone's respect and love. Arbor's face was cold and solemn. After saying this, he turned around and left with the small monk in his arms. "Come back." King Doro stared at Arbor's back and shouted harshly. "No. Come back." Could it be that he could only live like this for the rest of his life? To be locked up in this dark water dungeon and spend the rest of his life in fear and trepidation? No, he was King Doro, the ruler of the Doro kingdom. He was also a ruler, so how could the great emperor treat him like this? The rebellion more than 10 years ago had caused him to flee to the Pingjin Prairie. He had suffered for so many years, plotted for so many years, painstakingly cultivated and exhausted his mind. Was this the end? Chapter 51-30. He couldn't accept it, he really couldn't accept it. Amidst the crackling electricity, King Duoluo glared furiously at the departing figures of Qiao Mu and company. He strenuously stretched out a hand and called out feebly through the cage, "No, come back. No. Come back, come back, come back," bang. Opening the secret door of the dungeon, a ray of light, like a flash in the pan, flickered at the water cage's entrance. Then, it once again returned to darkness. King Duoluo was completely flustered. He unwillingly shouted at Xiao Yi, You go call them back." We will have a good talk, a good talk. He really didn't expect that these two people would have this kind of attitude. They didn't give him the slightest compromise and didn't listen to him at all. King Doro was completely at his wits' end. He couldn't do anything to these two youngsters who were like newborn calves that weren't afraid of tigers. Who knew that this husband and wife pair would have such a deceptive character? Others hadn't even finished speaking when the two impatiently left with the little monk in their arms. Couldn't they have a good talk? So why did they come here today? Did they just want to arrogantly tell him that Kong Kong would become the adopted grandson of the great emperor in a short while? Or did they want to say that in the future, Kong Kong would no longer have anything to do with him, King Doro, and the entire King Doro estate? King Doro's outer garment that was stuck to the cage was already completely soaked in sweat. This made the soreness even more intense. The electric current passed through his skin and went straight into his heart and lungs. That kind of heart-drilling and lung-piercing sizzling feeling really made his entire body feel extremely painful and numb. Only now did he know how vicious the methods of this couple, the Crown Prince and Crown Princess, were. However, Xiao Yi unexpectedly said with a smile, "Just now, there was a child here, the masters didn't want this subordinate to be too strict with you. After all, it was bloody, the child might have nightmares at night." King Doro's face was stuck to the cage. If there was a mirror in front of him right now, he would naturally see clusters of small snake-like electric currents moving back and forth on his face. The skin all over his body had long been charred by the electric current. Because his spiritual energy was sealed, he simply couldn't circulate his energy to resist the power of the 5 spirits contained in the cage. Therefore, one could imagine the pain he was feeling right now. What do you want, what do you want to do? King Duo Luo was now somewhat terrified. He thought that he had to find a chance to talk to Kong Yin. He had to find a way to survive. However, he did not expect that Kong Yin would be so tasteless as to directly seek out the couple. Now that things had turned out this way, it seemed that there was no way to salvage the situation. Don't forget, I am the Crown Prince's uncle. You can't do this to me. That's impossible. Heh. Xiao Yi could not help but sneer. He raised his hand to press his face against the cage. Is that so? If you don't want to cause trouble for His Highness, I can let you stay for a few more days. Xiao Yi waved the porcelain bottle in his hand in front of King Doro and said with a smile, "Look, this is a gift from the Crown Princess Darren. What if you took it yourself? Let me help you." King Duo Luo's complexion abruptly changed. He couldn't help but tremble. You dare to lynch this old man? His Majesty hasn't even said that he's going to execute me. How dare you? How dare you? Whether I dare or not, isn't it only after I do it that we'll know? Xiao Yi said with a chuckle as he waved the porcelain bottle in front of him. Chapter 51-31. In this subordinate's opinion, King Duo Luo is at death's door, yet he's no longer as brave as he was in the past. He's also a coward. How about this, let this subordinate fulfill my filial piety for the prince. Scram! Scram, scram, scram. King Duo Luo forcefully waved his hands, but his entire body was pressed against the iron cage. The range of movement his hands could move was no more than half a meter. Moreover, his spiritual power was currently sealed, making him akin to a cripple. Even if he extended his hand to slap Xiao Yi, the other party would only treat it as scratching an itch. King Duo Luo's slap had no effect whatsoever on Xiao Yi. You let go of this old man. We need to discuss this. How about this, you go and ask the Crown Prince and Crown Princess to come back. Tisk. Xiao Yi smiled and shook his head. I didn't expect the prince to actually admit defeat. I originally thought that with the prince's fearless temperament, he wouldn't admit defeat even at death's door. It's really only when things come to a head that one can truly see a person clearly. At this moment, King Duo Luo didn't bother arguing with Xiao Yi. What he wanted to do the most right now was to fight for his life. Fight for his life, he must fight for it. At this very moment, King Duo Luo was already extremely regretful. In his opinion, if he had known earlier that the Crown Prince and Crown Princess were actually such stubborn people, then he naturally wouldn't have dared to provoke these two lords. The most hateful of all should be that old baldy Kong Yin. It was he who had to invite this couple over. Now that he was riding a tiger, he had no way to back down. He simply didn't know what to do next. "Prince, can you go on your way with peace of mind?" Xiao Yi asked with a chuckle. King Duo Luo's entire body trembled, and he said in an almost pleading tone, Can't you give this old man, another chance? How about this?" Before he could finish speaking, he saw Xiao Ye's expression turn cold, and he unceremoniously grabbed his face with one hand, forcing him to open his mouth. A porcelain bottle of medicinal powder was poured in just like that, without mercy, causing old King Duo Luo to cough incessantly. "Ah, you. Although King Duo Luo didn't know what powder Xiao Yi had forced him to take, he was very clear in his heart that it definitely wasn't anything good. He was extremely flustered, and the hair on his head was standing on end because of the electric shock. "Mo Lien. Xiao Mu." He bellowed hoarsely, his tone laced with intense hatred. However, as soon as he finished speaking, he realized that he had completely lost his voice. His eyes were lifeless, and he sat down in a daze. With a splash, he sat down in the water. From his neck down, his entire body was soaked in the smelly water, but he didn't feel it at all. He just stared blankly at Xiao Yi. Ha. Not long after, Xiao Yi heard a few gasps coming from King Duo Luo's throat. The gasps were sometimes fast and sometimes slow, sometimes short and sometimes long, but his face looked extremely normal. There was nothing abnormal about him at all. However, Xiao Yi knew that King Duo Luo might have already lost his mind. Looking at how he was staring blankly at him, sitting in the cold water in a daze, he knew that this King Duo Luo would probably stop here for the rest of his life. Everyone who stayed by the young Crown Prince Consort's side was well aware of her methods. Anyone who provoked her definitely wouldn't have a good ending. What's more, this King Duo Luo just had to court death by extending his hand to the little monk Kong Kong. With the little Crown Princess' protective nature, she definitely wouldn't let him go. Even if this King Duo Luo hadn't done anything yet. Chapter 5132. Even though King Doro had yet to cause any harm to the little monk, based on the Crown Princess's watertight personality, she absolutely wouldn't look on coldly from the sidelines and watch the situation change step by step in a dangerous direction. She would definitely nip those people and matters that could endanger the little monk in the bud first. Xiao Yi observed King Doro for a good while and only turned to leave after confirming that there were no abnormalities. The last trace of light in the dungeon followed the light closing of the iron door. King Doro, who was sitting in the water in a daze, opened his mouth and revealed a foolish smile. When Arbor stepped out of the Supreme Court's main entrance with the little monk in his arms, he lowered his head to glance at the little baldy. She saw the child silently drooping his little head, looking listless as if he didn't have much energy. Sir Jojo bluntly knocked his smooth head lightly. "Why are you acting so gloomy and pensive? Raise your head and look at me," the little stoic said. The little monk raised his small head and glanced at Arbor with his round eyes. "Remember, no matter when or where, don't feel gloomy and upset over some unimportant people. How is he related to you?" The little monk puffed up his small cheeks. "He says he's Xiao Na's grandfather." "Benefactress, is this bad guy really Xiao Na's grandfather?" "Yes." Arbor nodded and stroked the child's head. "But other than that bit of bloodline similarity, it can be said that you and him aren't related in any way. Has he ever come to visit you since you were born?" The little monk shook his head. Has he ever fulfilled even the slightest bit of responsibility as a grandfather? The little monk shook his head again. So to you, what's the difference between him and those strangers outside? The little monk thought about it and said, there's no difference. Then there's no difference. Arbor said, you and him are only strangers. Don't you feel a lot better after thinking about it this way? The little monk nodded. Benefactress, does this bad guy want to use me to threaten you? He is very bad and has done all kinds of bad things. He doesn't have the slightest bit of fatherly affection for your parents, nor does he have the slightest bit of blood kinship. But you don't have to call him a bad guy. He was heartless to all of you. Your deceased parents were implicated by him and had no choice but to live in seclusion in the lower star area. They never returned to the imperial capital, Dragon Flame City. In the end, they also ignored this person. You don't have to pay attention to this person either. When we meet on normal days, it's enough for us to treat each other like strangers. We only need to show some superficial courtesy. If you call him a bad guy, others will think that you don't understand reason. Of course, the two of you will never meet again in the future. Moreover, there is no need for you to meet at all. The small monk nodded his head in confusion. The benefactress said that if they met in the future, they just had to politely greet each other as if they were strangers. Actually, I don't really want to see this detestable old man with a twisted face. Benefactress, did you lie to him just now? What did I lie to him about? Arbor lowered his head and glanced at the little monk. She saw that the little fellow's cheeks were flushed red, and he glanced at her with some embarrassment. It's about that benefactress's bandit husband passing the booklet. Who's a bandit? Mo Lien glared at him in annoyance. She took him from Jojo's arms and pinched his chubby little face. You have no manners. You have to call me Dad in the future. See you at the same time tonight. Chapter 51-33. The little monk's round eyes slightly brightened, and he lowered his head in embarrassment. In his small heart, he actually yearned for his parents, but he had never mentioned it to anyone before. Now that happiness had suddenly descended upon him, he inexplicably felt that it was unreal. Benefactress was going to become the little monk's mother. The little monk was secretly delighted, and his head involuntarily rubbed against Mo Lien's body. He turned to look at Arbor and asked, Benefactress, haven't you always despised this little monk for being talkative? Arbor said expressionlessly, you are indeed talkative. But being talkative is also your specialty. Arbor followed up with another sentence. She didn't know if it was because she was used to his nagging, but sometimes without the little monk's nagging, she actually felt a little unaccustomed. The little monk replied with an, oh. His round eyes glanced at Arbor, and then at Mo Lien. Benefactress's bandit husband. Mo Lien resisted the urge to knock his little head, and said speechlessly, don't you find it tiring to say such a long string of words? He always crowned everyone with the title of benefactress last time. His father-in-law even complained to him, asking him why little Master Kong Kong always called him benefactress's father. Wasn't he tired of nagging like this? What could Mo Lien say? He could only comfort his father-in-law that he was already considered good. For example, he might even add the word bandit on top of benefactress's husband. At that time, his father-in-law looked at him with a melancholy expression, and Mo Lien would never forget it. The child still had to be educated, and education had to start with changing the way he addressed him. From now on, you have to change all those nonsensical titles from before, do you understand? Mo Lien lowered his head to look at the little monk, and said with a serious face, in the future, you have to call Jojo's father and mother, and grandfather and grandmother. Don't keep calling him benefactress's father and benefactress's mother, it sounds like you're scolding people. It's also not elegant. Understand? The little monk nodded reluctantly. Benefactress's husband, why are you so demanding of this little monk? Look at the benefactress, she has never asked me to do this or that. You have to learn more from the benefactress. Mo Lien had the urge to slap this little monk to death. Enough! He roared at him and threw him into the hands of the monk Kong Yin. The matter is settled. We are going back to the half-moon cliff. You bring the little monk back to the temple first. Recently, he has been neglecting his studies in the morning and evening. Master Kong Yin should give him some guidance. The little monk widened his round eyes in shock. He pointed at Mo Lien with his little finger and said in a trembling voice, "Benefactress's bandit husband. You are actually such a vengeful person." He had just said a few unpleasant things about him, and now, he was taking revenge on him. The female benefactor's bandit husband was really a bad person. Arbor was speechless. Every time he saw the two of them bickering, he felt that the crown prince was like an idiot. His IQ was almost as high as the little monk's. Men, Arbor turned to look at Master Kong Yin. Do you want to spend some time with Kong Kong? That's good too. Kong Yin smiled kindly. Kong Kong, who was used to living a good life, couldn't help but cry out with a bitter face, "Benefactress, are you going to throw this little monk away now?" Kong Yin rubbed the child's head and said in a disappointed tone, "Kong Kong, it seems like you don't want to return to the temple with this old monk at all." The little monk quickly said, "That's not it, master." She turned to look at Arbor. Chapter 51-34. Her round little face was filled with anticipation. "Benefactress, you must remember to come and pick me up in 2 days." Arbor nodded, and the little monk finally turned to look at First Elder Kong Yin in satisfaction. "Master, let's go." Heartless little thing. Kong Yin could not resist scolding him with a smile. This little imp just loved to follow his benefactress around. They hadn't parted yet, but he already wanted to confirm a return date. He was only willing to leave after obtaining the benefactress's promise. After the two people left, Arbor turned to look at Mo Lien and said, "I've already obtained the three-headed dog's blood, so I've been waiting for this batch of revival Bodhi grass to mature these past few days. It's about ready now. The matters here can be considered settled, so I plan to return to Splendid Villa and enter closed-door cultivation for a few days. This time, I have to wholeheartedly immerse myself in concocting the revival Bodhi pill." Arbor said with a frown, "It's not easy to challenge a saint-rank pill above your level, and you can face failure at any time. So for this period of time, I know." Mo Lien grasped his hand. "You can enter closed-door cultivation by yourself. I'll wait for your return at the villa." Xiao Mu gave a and nodded vigorously. On the other hand, Mo Lien glanced at her hesitantly. After calling out, "Xiao Xiao," he paused as if he wanted to say something. "I know what you want to say." From his expression, Xiao Mu knew what he was likely to say next. "You want me to treat the matter of saving Murong Sun with a normal heart. You're afraid that even if I wholeheartedly immerse myself in it, there's a possibility of failure when the time comes, right? Don't worry, so many years have already passed. I've already accepted what I need to accept." Arbor looked at him seriously and said, "This is my final effort as a disciple. If Heaven's will is like this, then when the time comes I still won't be able to save her," Arbor said gloomily, "then I'll accept my fate." Although she was sad, compared to the pain of being forcibly torn apart several years ago, she had mentally prepared herself now. In the future she would be able to bear it. "All right, it's good that you understand." Mo Lien heaved a sigh of relief and nodded slightly. She reached out to hold her hand and said, "Don't worry and go refine the pills. I'll take care of the matters at home." Arbor nodded. The two of them hurried back to the city and rushed back to the half-moon cliff. It was only at night that the news reached the great emperor. The great emperor's expression was inexplicable. He raised his head and glanced at the secret guard who reported, "How is the person in the dungeon now?" "Completely stupid." The shadow guard lowered his head and said, "This subordinate has checked repeatedly and confirmed that there are no traces of disguise." "Yes. His Excellency the Great Emperor sighed and said, "My son is still soft-hearted after all." The secret guard swallowed his saliva and didn't dare to reply. However, the Great Emperor could not help but glance at him when he saw that he wanted to say something. "Pumpkin, if you have something to say, just say it." The secret guard gathered his courage and said, "Your Majesty, this subordinate feels that you might have some misunderstandings about the Crown Prince." The Great Emperor raised his eyebrows and looked like he wanted to hear more. The secret guard said, "This subordinate has checked. That medicinal powder is very stimulating. Not only will it cause King Duoluo to lose his voice and become severely retarded in the short term, as time passes, his insides will burn and the organs inside will probably die. This painful process may last for 1 to 2 years before he completely returns to normal." The Great Emperor was stunned. "Is that so?" Chapter 51-35. Yes. That secret guard nodded vigorously with an affirmative expression. "Then this powder is my son's?" "It's not, Your Majesty." The secret guard said expressionlessly, "According to this subordinate's investigation, this powder was personally ground by the Crown Princess." The Emperor nodded somewhat dazedly, then suddenly inhaled. "But my son didn't add fuel to the fire." This didn't seem like him at all. His Highness the Crown Prince secretly ordered that subordinate named Xiao Yi to cripple all of King Duoluo's spiritual power and cultivation after feeding him the powder, turning him into a complete cripple. Only then did the Emperor nod with a pleased expression. "That's more like my son. My son is such a vicious person. He looks so harmless on the surface, but he's done so many ruthless things." Seeing the Emperor's current expression, the secret guard couldn't help but twitch his mouth. It seemed like the Crown Prince's methods were vicious, and he was especially fond of the Emperor. His Highness the Crown Prince seemed to have even said that this King Duoluo was guilty of the most heinous crimes. If it weren't for the fact that the Emperor wanted to keep him alive, he would have been sent on his way long ago. The Emperor nodded with a gratified expression. "That's what my son would do." The secret guard especially wanted to complain, "Can you not praise your son so shamelessly? This doesn't seem to be a good thing." The Emperor praised a few times with a face full of approval, then turned to ask the secret guard, "Why haven't you left after reporting?" The secret guard was truly speechless. He lowered his head and rolled his eyes. "Your Majesty, then this subordinate will take his leave." "All right." The Emperor waved his hand and suddenly stopped him. "Hey, wait. Right, that Zhu Fei, where is he now?" The secret guard bowed and said, "I've arranged for him to be in a courtyard in the south of the city." "Your Majesty, do you want to see this person?" If this Zhu Fei hadn't surrendered to the Emperor and contributed the firearms distribution map of East and West 12th Street, perhaps this Dragon Flame City would have been in a state of panic for a while. A trace of coldness flitted through the Emperor's eyes. No need. At this moment, there wasn't the slightest bit of warmth in his eyes, only indifference and coldness. "Go, take care of this person in secret, don't leave any traces." The secret guard nodded and didn't ask any more questions. He accepted the order and immediately left. How could he spare someone like Zhu Fei? In front of benefits, he could repay kindness with enmity and treat King Duoluo. No one knew if this person would completely betray them in the future. Such a despicable person who forgets righteousness at the sight of profit naturally couldn't be left alive. Arbor was in seclusion in the domain of stars for a long time. When he finished concocting the soul-returning Bodhi pill, he opened his eyes. The pill in his hand was covered in golden light. It shone dazzlingly and eagerly wanted to fly out. Only after sticking a sealing talisman on the pill did Xiao Mu manage to stabilize it in her palm. Xiao Qiao closed her eyes and entered a state of advancement once again. It was unknown whether it was due to her previous accumulation or not. He Chen and the others followed the scent of the medicine. They saw the little fellow sitting in front of the fine sky jade dragon with her eyes closed. As she breathed in and out, endless divine power was absorbed into her body from all directions. Each time Jojo advanced, there was a feeling of broadening people's horizons. It was the same at this moment. Arbor absorbed divine power for more than half a month on the main planet before it was enough to support her this time's leveling up. By the time she opened her eyes, more than a month had passed on the main planet. The little stoic's eyes were bright, and her fair face had a bit of rosy color. She appeared to be full of vigor. He-chan couldn't help but tsk lightly. You leveled up again. Chapter 51-36. Watching Jojo advance was like watching her drink water. It was so fast that it made people want to sigh uncontrollably. Everyone said that it wasn't easy for female cultivators to cultivate. It would be even more troublesome, especially if they were unlucky enough to encounter the 5 spirits' reincarnation or advance during pregnancy. A single mishap and they might be struck to death by heavenly law. This time, Jojo successfully advanced from 7th level Divine Practitioner to 8th level Divine Practitioner. She skipped over the minor realms of initial success, phenomenal success, and peak. The problem was that she seemed to have advanced not long ago. Besides, it was already good enough that other people's cultivation didn't regress during pregnancy. Many people found it difficult to advance even half a step. Yet she, as expected, Jojo was different from the rest. Arbor glanced at the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, who wanted to say something but was hesitating. She waved her hand and said, "Speak." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's mouth twitched. He didn't know if it was his imagination, but he felt like the little stoic's queenly aura was becoming stronger and stronger. She waved her small hand, and a queenly aura that exuded dignity without being angry assaulted him. "Jojo, is it strenuous to advance?" "It's not strenuous at all." Arbor looked at him in confusion. She raised her hand and looked left and right. She abruptly sent out a palm strike, forming a divine power vortex in the air. Soon, this power was pulled back by her again, and the divine power dispersed around her body and vanished into nothingness. Even Ma Shichen couldn't help but exclaim in admiration at this kind of willful control over divine power. "Jojo, I feel like there's absolutely no one else in the world who has this kind of control over divine power." Ma Shichen wasn't stingy with her praise. Arbor was overjoyed and nodded her small head. "Not bad." Holy Sun Mayan, who had rushed over to watch the show after hearing the news, said indifferently, "Since she's pregnant, then she should recuperate properly." In other words, she didn't need to be in a hurry to advance during this critical period. The little stoic, who was used to rebuking people, said expressionlessly, "I've been recuperating all this time. I just feel like my cultivation keeps rising in my sleep, and I'm about to advance when the conditions are right." Mayan, why did he inexplicably not want to talk to this stoic? He couldn't even speak 3 sentences with the stoic before she shut him up. "Follow the will of the heavens." Arbor added, "I have to go out and meet the heavenly axiom. I wonder if it will give me a 5 spirits experience this time." "I don't think so." Holy Sun Mayan said expressionlessly, "During the 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation, it was not willing to strike you, let alone now." Yuan Shichen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "I think what the Holy Sun said makes a lot of sense. Jojo, why don't we just leave?" Arbor shook his head. "Facing is a matter of attitude. It doesn't matter if it comes or not, I can't avoid it. I have to face it head on. Let it come." He-Chen and Holy Sun Mi-Yen twitched their lips at the same time. The 2 people speechlessly looked at the little stoic. The little girl's face was full of fighting spirit as she rushed out of the star field in a hurry. "I think she is going to be disappointed," Holy Sun Mi-Yen said expressionlessly. "I think so too." A moment later Wei Zichin's personal maidservant, Xiaoyun, hastily ran to the forecourt to find Mo Lien. Ignoring that Prince Mo was talking to second Uncle Qiao, she walked up and bowed before saying, Madam wants His Highness the Crown Prince to quickly go to the inner courtyard to take a look. Eldest Miss seems to have come out of seclusion, but her expression is a bit off. What's off? Mo Lien's heart skipped a beat. She keeps shouting at the sky, come, come. Chapter 51-37. Wei Ziqin was extremely anxious. Ever since her daughter went into closed-door cultivation 3 days ago, she had been feeling uneasy and unable to let go. Now, her daughter had finally come out of closed-door cultivation. But from the start, she had been pointing at the sky and the earth, shouting something at the cloudless blue sky. She came over from the other end of the long corridor and discovered this situation. It was only when she got closer that she heard her daughter shouting, come, come. Come. Come for what? Wei Ziqin walked over with a dumbfounded expression and hurriedly sent her capable maidservant to the front yard to invite His Highness the Crown Prince over. She wasn't proficient in cultivation and didn't know what was going on with her daughter, but she felt that something was amiss. She had to invite His Highness the Crown Prince over for her to be at ease. Wei Ziqin walked over and cautiously called out, Jojo. At first, Arbor didn't hear, but after Wei Ziqin called out a few more times, Arbor turned her head, her little face rosy. She looked at her mother and grinned. Mother. Wei Ziqin saw that her daughter was fine and relaxed. Jojo, what are you doing? Arbor had been shouting for so long and was already tired. She took the handkerchief from Kai Chi and wiped the sweat on her forehead. She waved her hand nonchalantly. It's nothing, mother. If you don't want to come, then forget it. Let's go to the living room. This heavenly Tao didn't come when it was supposed to, but when it wasn't supposed to, it was always blindly prattling. She had had enough. Arbor hugged her mother's arm and pursed her little lips. Mother, daughter's cultivation level increased slightly. I thought the heavenly Tao would test me, but I didn't expect nothing at all. Wei Ziqin nodded and looked up at the cloudless sky. It doesn't look like it's going to rain immediately. Jojo, you can cultivate, but don't push yourself too hard. You have to remember that you're pregnant with the imperial grandson. Arbor looked at her mother blankly. I didn't push myself. I was just sleeping, and my cultivation level inexplicably increased, and then I'm about to advance. The group of maidservants behind her couldn't help but roll their eyes when they heard this. The little crown princess was blatantly showing off. He was showing off, right? No one could cultivate so easily and freely. What did he mean by his cultivation inexplicably increased just by sleeping? Was this a joke? Wei Ziqin could not help but look at her daughter speechlessly. In the end, she could only say dryly, it's good that it's not hard. When the crown prince heard that his wife had come out of seclusion and rushed over, he couldn't help but cover his face. His wife was coming in the backyard. It was really shocking. He hoped that his mother-in-law was not frightened. Mo Lien had just stepped into the backyard when she heard a loud bang. A bolt of purple-red lightning in the sky suddenly smashed into the ground not far away from his feet. He was so scared that he instinctively retracted his legs and took a big step back. The little stoic was about to help her mother into the hall when she suddenly heard a clap of thunder coming from behind them. She quickly turned around. Wei Ziqin also jumped in fright and quickly turned her head to take a look. She saw His Highness the Crown Prince's innocent and pitiful expression as he stared at the mother and daughter pair with his beautiful phoenix eyes. Arbor couldn't help but want to laugh. He looked up at the sky, then at hubby, and exasperatedly shook his head. It's sick. This heavenly law was truly an unreliable fellow. She had waited for it for the better part of a day, but it didn't strike a single bolt of lightning. Now that it saw hubby, it suddenly pointed the spearhead at him. Was it trying to infuriate her, so it wanted to take hubby down a notch? Chapter 51-38. Was it really alright to take it so unreliable? Xiao Mu hastily walked up to her pitiful husband and patted him placatingly. Don't be scared, it's just a paper tiger. It doesn't dare to really attack you, so it's just going to smash next to your feet to scare you. Wifey, why does it attack me when you provoke it? Arbor pondered for 3 seconds before saying seriously, it's probably because it doesn't dare to provoke me. His Highness the Crown Prince, my wifey is so arrogant, what should I do? Jojo, then you have to protect me well. Arbor nodded vigorously and patted his chest with a serious expression. The next time it dares to scare you, we'll go up to the sky and blast a hole in it. Wei Zichin's mouth twitched as she looked up at the sky. It was still the same clear sky that seemed to have been washed clean by clear water. There was not the slightest shadow of thunder and lightning. She hurried forward and said to her daughter and son-in-law, it should be fine now, right? Was Chamois affected by the lightning? Actually, how could anything happen to the crown prince? He was just used to acting pitiful in front of his wifey and hiding behind her to act coquettishly. Seeing the lingering fear on his mother-in-law's face, the crown prince hurried forward with a smile. Mother, it's fine. I was just caught off guard and was startled by the sound of the lightning. It didn't hit me anywhere, don't worry. Wei Zichin saw that the crown prince was dressed in white and had black hair. His entire body was untainted, and he really didn't look like he was roasted by the lightning. Only then did she relax and nod with a smile. The three of them chatted and laughed as they walked into the living room. Wei Zichin suddenly remembered something and turned to her daughter. Jojo, you said you were going into seclusion for 3 days to refine pills. That pill. Arbor was silent for a few seconds before nodding. It's already a success. Then did Peak Master Murong. Arbor shook his head. No, I haven't given it to her yet. Wei Zichin held her daughter's hand with a comforting expression. Jojo, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Right, Mom is right. Mo Lien hastily interjected from the side, Xiao, just do your best in everything. Wei Zichin nodded with certainty. That's right. Arbor pursed her lips at the two of them. She understood the logic, but it was difficult to put it into practice. Her heart was filled with hope. However, he was also afraid that this ray of light would eventually be drowned by the darkness. Don't worry. Mo Lien held her hand and gave her some encouragement. I believe in Jojo. Your alchemy skills are the best in the world. If even the pill you concocted doesn't work, then Murong Sun truly had no hope. I have so much confidence in you, so how can you not have this confidence yourself? Looking at her husband's relaxed tone, Arbor reluctantly nodded at him and took a deep breath. Don't fear failure and move forward courageously. I'll feed Master the pill in a bit. Okay. Wei Zichin felt comforted when she saw that her daughter's mentality seemed to have relaxed. You were in seclusion for more than 2 days, which means you spent about a month in the star domain to advance this time. Mother, this isn't considered long, Mo Lien said to her mother-in-law. The further you go, the longer it takes to advance. Until you enter the transcendent realm and enter seclusion to cultivate and advance, 1 or 2 years might not even be considered long. Thankfully, time flows 12 times faster in the star domain. Chapter 5139. 1 or 2 years, which is equivalent to 1 or 2 months in the outside world. Wei Zichin sighed with emotion, and there was a trace of rejoicing. For a cultivator, this was considered an extremely short period of time. Her daughter's star domain was truly a natural treasure, saving them a lot of time on the path of cultivation. The three of them entered the hall and sat down. Wei Zichin suddenly thought of something and said, a few days ago, the Countess of Huainan came to visit and sent me an invitation card. The Count of Huainan's estate holds the Butterfly Night Banquet every year, and that day coincides with her 50th birthday. Therefore, they plan to hold the banquet at noon together with the Butterfly Night Banquet in the evening. Wei Zichin held Arbor's hand and said, the Countess of Huainan specially came to visit, and mother was too embarrassed to reject her, so she planned to go there. Arbor nodded. It was naturally good for mother to make more friends, and Arbor would not object to her attending such banquets. Although to her, banquets were never good, and all banquets were too boring. But she was her, and mother was mother. If mother wanted to attend, then she should attend. As long as she took precautions to ensure mother's safety, it would be fine. Your sister hasn't come out of seclusion yet. Wei Ziqin sighed. Otherwise, this little naughty monkey would definitely not miss such a lively event. Arbor's brows moved slightly, and she said expressionlessly, "Then I'll go with mother." After saying that, she almost bit her tongue and regretted it a little. Lord Jojo hated to attend boring banquets the most. If not for her mother's melancholy tone and the fact that she was alone with no one to accompany her, she would not have volunteered. Wei Ziqin could not help but want to laugh. How could she not see her daughter's vexed expression? She patted her daughter's hand and said with a smile, "Jojo, you don't have to force yourself." Arbor pursed her lips and muttered in a low voice, "It's not particularly forced." Wei Ziqin couldn't help laughing out loud. After dinner, Arbor pulled Mo Lien into the star area, heading straight to the mountain behind Paradise Star. They stood in front of the ice coffin on the slope of Paradise Star for a long time. Until Mo Lien gently pulled her wrist. Only then did Xiao Mu raise her hand. A pill with a hint of golden light slowly flew out from her palm and floated in the air, moving up and down slightly. Because it was suppressed by a sealing talisman, this sacred medicine was very obedient. Arbor took a deep breath and looked back at Mo Lien. The latter nodded slightly at her, raised his hand, and gently lifted the lid of the crystal coffin and moved it to the side. Xiao Mu looked at Murong Sun's unchanging face and took a deep breath before taking a few steps forward. She stuffed the pill into Murong Sun's mouth, her movements slightly trembling. Although her heart was surging like a tidal wave, she pretended to be completely unconcerned on the surface. This pill rapidly melted the moment it entered her mouth. Without any movement, this sacred medicine would naturally take effect in the human body. Arbor and Mo Lien both squatted in front of the crystal coffin and waited for a while. Mo Lien reached out to feel Murong Sun's breathing, a hint of joy flitting through her eyes. "I think she's breathing." Arbor also hastily tried, and her heart thumped heavily. It wasn't an illusion, and it wasn't as if it was. There really was a faint breath. The little stoic's hands were tightly clasped together. She gently bit her lips and impatiently stared at the silent woman inside the crystal coffin. Chapter 5140. Would Master suddenly open her eyes? If Master opened her eyes, she would be able to see Jojo immediately. At that time, Jojo would definitely punch her and curse her for being a damn liar. Arbor suddenly shook his head. No, I can't hit Master. Even if Master wakes up, her body should be very weak. I can't hit her. Then I can only curse her. Yes, I'll curse her to death. Ah, no. I can't curse her to death. I saved her with great difficulty, so I can't let anything happen to her. Just as Xiao Mu's imagination was running wild, Murong Sun quietly laid in the coffin the entire time, quietly exhaling in a barely discernible manner. She did not open her eyes and look at Xiao with a smile as Xiao Mu expected. Hence, she did not give Arbor a chance to properly curse her. Mo Lien worriedly turned to Arbor. Jojo. Yes. Arbor was not as dispirited and miserable as Mo Lien imagined. Instead, she turned to look at him with sparkling eyes and comforted him first. It's fine, I know. Master has passed away for many years. Even if she used the soul-returning Bodhi pill to recover her vital signs, I'm afraid it will take some time for her to completely wake up. She will recover. Sir Jojo tightly clenched his fists. I have confidence that I can cure her. This was already a good start. She believed that Master would slowly recover her consciousness. Once she regained her consciousness, her recovery time would accelerate and shorten because Master was not someone who habitually admitted defeat. She believed that even if there was only a sliver of hope, Master would definitely do her utmost to recover herself. Mo Lien relaxed and grasped Murong Sun's hand. It's great that you can think it through. Even if Peak Master Murong wakes up in the future, it will probably take some time for her to recover her original cultivation. After all, she was sealed in ice for so many years after the Great Battle, so she probably lost all her cultivation already. Arbor clenched his fists. As long as she can regain her consciousness and slowly wake up, it's only a matter of time before her body recovers. Don't be hasty, she warned herself. Don't be hasty. Although waiting made people anxious, waiting was also a kind of hope in disguise. Everything was fine as long as there was hope. If she couldn't fix it the first time, then she would fix it the second time. If she couldn't fix it the second time, then she would fix it the third time and fourth time. There would be a day when Murong Sun would return to her original state. Just like in Shijiao City, he followed behind her and called her his disciple at this moment. She still remembered that she had entered through the window and waved at her with a smile. Disciple, call me master. It will be fine, Arbor told himself. Everything will be fine soon. She had to believe in herself, and she had to believe in her master even more. She had said that she would protect him for the rest of his life. How could she go back on her words? A few days later, a continuous rain swept across the land of Dragon Flame City. Arbor regretted it so much. But who told her to agree to her mother's request in the spur of the moment? She had dug a hole for herself, so she had to jump into it even if she had to cry. Asking her to go out in this kind of weather was practically no different from forcing her to go to the execution ground. She hated rainy days the most. Her shoes would get wet the moment she stepped on them. Wei Ziqin sat in the carriage and stared at her daughter's gloomy stoic face. She wanted to laugh a little. Mother already said that it's fine if you don't come out with us on rainy days. It's fine if Mother attends alone. You have to do what you promised, the little stoic said sulkily. Wei Ziqin almost laughed out loud. Happy New Year, my friends. Everyone, continue to charge forward together. Do your best to protect yourself and resist the virus. Be healthy and eat well. Believe in the future, believe that everything will get better. Chapter 51-41. Her daughter's stoic face could store any emotion. After interacting with her for a long time, one would know that under this stoic expression, there were all kinds of emotions. Happy, depressed, irritated, angry sometimes, it was just a subtle change. Those who were close to her, such as Crown Prince Lien and Wei Ziqin, could see some clues from her small face. Sir Jojo sat upright and still, holding a jar of plums in his hands and popping them into his mouth. I haven't seen Kong Kong in a few days. Since we're going to Count Huainan's estate today, why don't we pick up Kong Kong? Wei Ziqin suggested. Okay. This little imp was a bit annoying, but she was inexplicably unused to not having him nagging beside her. Speaking of Kong Kong, Wei Ziqin couldn't help but sigh. I really didn't expect the little monk Kong Kong to be related to little Mo by blood. Then what's his proper name? The little stoic couldn't help but be taken aback. She really didn't know Kong Kong's proper name. She heard her mother ramble on and asked curiously, Mo Kong Kong. Arbor's mouth twitched, and she suddenly said whimsically, how about I give the little monk a name? As the little monk's foster mother, wasn't it too natural for her to give her son a name? No need, no need. Wei Ziqin repeatedly waved her hand, feeling that she couldn't let her daughter cheat this little grandson of hers. I think we should just call him Mo Kong. It's simple and catchy, Wei Ziqin hastily said. It's easy to write. The little monk was literate and had outstanding literary talent. Wasn't her mother overly worried that the little monk wouldn't know how to write if she changed his name? Arbor pursed her lips and nodded reluctantly. That's fine too. Wei Ziqin chatted with her daughter the entire way, and the carriage soon arrived at the small path in front of Count Huainan's estate. Count Huainan's estate was located in a secluded area in the western part of the city. In front of the door was a small stone path that could only allow one carriage to pass through. The road was a little bumpy, and the whole journey would take about 15 minutes. Those who could receive an invitation from the Duke of Huainan's mansion were mostly the reputable madams and young ladies in Dragon Flame City. There were madams and daughters of officials, as well as young ladies and madams of aristocratic families. Wei Ziqin's carriage was considered to have arrived rather late. When he turned to the gravel road in front of him, the road ahead was already blocked. He could vaguely hear the sound of quarreling coming from the wind. Arbor lifted a corner of the curtain, glanced outside, and immediately threw the curtain down. It was misty outside the window, and she could see the wet raindrops at a glance. Immediately, the little crown princess lost her interest in looking. Wei Ziqin knew her daughter's temperament very well, so she couldn't help but laugh. She also went forward to lift the curtain and looked through the rain for a while. There seems to be a collision between two carriages in front. Soon, the coachman who went to inquire about the news hurriedly came to the window in a straw raincoat and reported, "Madam, Crown Princess, a carriage in front has turned over, and now it's blocking the road." Wei Ziqin couldn't help but frown. This small stone path was the only way to Count Huainan's mansion. It would be troublesome if it was blocked. Oh my God! What should we do? Just as they were talking, a madam's exclamation came from a carriage behind them. The coachman reported to Wei Ziqin. "Looking at the situation, the road behind us is also blocked by an endless stream of carriages. There's no way to turn around. Madam, please wait in the carriage for a while. I'll go ahead to inquire about the news. Thank you for your hard work." Chapter 51-42. Don't say that, madam. This old servant is doing his duty. The coachman, wearing a straw raincoat, hurriedly left to scout ahead. Wei Ziqin turned around to glance at Xiao Mu before placating her kindly. "Xiao Qiao, the Count of Huainan's estate should be sending people out to help maintain order. Let's first settle down and wait." Arbor made an "oh" sound, his face expressionless, but Wei Ziqin knew that his daughter was a bit impatient. "I heard that Count Huainan's madam is bedridden all year round." Arbor suddenly said, "Then this banquet is? Could it be a concubine of Count Huainan's estate? It's madam who personally organized it." Wei Ziqin hurriedly said, "How could such a big banquet be organized by a concubine of the family? It would be rude to outsiders. But it's true that madam's health is not good." Wei Ziqin nodded. "I heard that Count Huainan seems to favor a second concubine of the family. It's said that the family's finances are all controlled by this concubine." Wei Ziqin wanted to laugh when she heard this. She glanced at her daughter and nodded. "Daughter, mother didn't expect that you would have the temperament of a nosy person." Her daughter expressionlessly looked at her mother and said indifferently, "Not at all." It wasn't that she was keen on being a nosy person, but that the little maidservants beside her chattered and casually told her. She basically knew about all the happenings in the family. One family was robbed today, and another family was married tomorrow. Wei Ziqin laughed and took her daughter's hand and patted it twice. "Second concubine's surname is Bao, and she also has a daughter. They are indeed very favored in Count Huainan's estate." At this point, Wei Ziqin couldn't help but sigh. Which family didn't have their own problems behind closed doors? Wasn't there a lack of cases of favoring the concubine and neglecting the wife? The more noble the family, the more wives and concubines, the more likely it was that a bowl of water would not be peaceful. Arbor said, "Oh." The mother and daughter were chatting when they suddenly heard two soft knocks coming from outside the carriage. Wei Ziqin lifted the curtain to take a look and saw that it was a person who looked like a steward. He was currently bowing towards their carriage. "Are the crown princess and the madam of the Qiao family in the carriage?" This is the wife of Minister Fong of the Ministry of Justice. I have specially come to pay my respects to the Crown Princess and Madame Chiao. Wei Ziqin looked over from the carriage and saw a middle-aged lady pulling a dignified and elegant young lady out of the carriage together. Braving the rain, they came over to greet them. Wei Ziqin hurriedly said, "Madame Fong, don't be so courteous. It's raining outside. Don't let Madame and Miss catch a cold." Steward, quickly help them into the carriage. Now that the road ahead is blocked, we don't know how long it will take for them to pass through. That middle-aged lady smiled and bowed in the direction of Wei Ziqin and Arbor. "Thank you, Crown Princess and Madame Chiao, for your understanding. There's no need to be so courteous." Wei Ziqin was a bit embarrassed. Seeing that the madams and young ladies in the nearby carriages were about to get out of their carriages to greet them, she hurriedly exhorted loudly, "Everyone, there's no need to be so impatient. It's raining heavily halfway through the journey, so don't be in a hurry to get out of the carriage. It won't be too late to meet again when we reach Count Huainan's residence." The madams and young ladies all thanked the Crown Princess and Madame Chiao before settling down. Wei Ziqin giggled and patted her expressionless daughter with a smile, softly muttering, "Looks like they were all scared by you." Arbor snorted, "When did I scare them? She didn't sleep well yesterday and was muddle-headed the entire day. Tomorrow, before 12 a.m., she would make up for 2 more chapters." Chapter 51-43. As long as these people didn't provoke her, they could get along well with each other, couldn't they? She wasn't a bipolar patient. Why would she cause trouble wherever she went? In fact, most of the time, she wasn't the one who made trouble. However, if others made trouble in front of her, she wouldn't be afraid of trouble. Wei Ziqin patted her daughter's little hand with a smile. She knew her daughter very well. In fact, she was the easiest person to get along with. As long as you didn't provoke her casually, she wouldn't take the initiative to talk to you for 100 years. She had been passive since she was a child and wasn't good at making friends with others first. And once she was annoyed, she would fight back fiercely. In recent years, his youngest daughter, Lin had also developed a temperament of, "If someone offends me, I'll definitely kill them," perhaps because she was influenced by what she saw. "Madam," the coachman came back in the rain and whispered to Wei Ziqin through the window, "I heard it. It's the concubine's daughter of Assistant Minister Zhang of the Ministry of Justice. Her carriage collided with Infanta Tao's. Now the second concubine of Duke Huainan's mansion is dealing with this matter with some maids and it may take some time. Madam and the Crown Princess can stay in the carriage at ease. When the road ahead is clear, we can enter the mansion." Arbor frowned slightly. How did they collide? It seems that Infanta Tao's carriage wanted to move forward and accidentally collided with Assistant Minister Zhang's daughter's carriage. Commandery Princess Tao's carriage turned over, and Commandery Princess Tao was frightened. Infanta Tao? Arbor looked puzzled. There are 3 Infanta Tao in the royal family. Everyone knows Infanta Wushuang. As for the other 2, one is Infanta Xingping, the daughter of Princess Hongyao. She married to Cangzhou 5 years ago. The other one is Infanta Fu, the youngest granddaughter of Great Elder Princess. She is 9 years old this year. She has been in poor health since she was a child and never attends banquets. Nobody knows her. There were very few princesses and infanta in the royal family of Mo who were enfeoffed with territories. Who was this Infanta Tao? The coachman was surprised and said, "I heard second concubine call her Princess Tao." "Oh yes, that's the princess of King Zheng's mansion." With that said, Arbor remembered. "So it's her daughter. Who is she?" Wei Ziqin asked curiously. "He's sick in the head," Arbor said sarcastically. King Zheng's Mo Shikong's brain wasn't very good either. In any case, his entire family wasn't like normal people. Hearing her daughter's words, Wei Ziqin knew that her daughter didn't like Princess Tao. This Princess Tao, she's not a princess. Arbor curled his lips. She's Mo Shikong's sister. Seeing his mother's confused look, Arbor gave his mother a rare explanation. Mo Shikong is His Majesty's adopted son. His father and younger sister's family returned to Zhengqing's mansion after he became successful. With that said, Wei Ziqin understood instantly. She nodded and said, so that's how it is. Then this Infanta Tao? Oh, that's what some people call themselves. Arbor couldn't help but roll her eyes. She didn't expect that Su Shitao, who had been reprimanded by the crown prince for her improper conduct, still dared to use Zhengqing's mansion's name and call herself a princess. Arbor shook her head speechlessly. I've never seen such a shameless woman. Chapter 51-44. It was said that women were thin-skinned and all had a sense of shame. However, in Arbor's opinion, this Su Shitao didn't have the slightest sense of shame. All day long, her vanity caused her mischief and she acted in a haughty manner. She was clearly nothing, but she had to put on airs everywhere she went. She didn't know whether to say that she was ignorant or that the Prince of Zheng was utterly ignorant. Arbor shook her head and chatted with her mother in the carriage. The coachman suddenly trotted over and said, Crown Princess, Madam, the road ahead is clear. We can go now. Wei Ziqin nodded and pulled her daughter to sit properly. Soon, the carriage began to move forward, but the speed wasn't very fast. After about 7 minutes, they finally arrived at the main entrance of Count Huainan's estate. Before Wei Ziqin and Arbor alighted from the carriage, they saw a black-robed old mama quickly walk over with an umbrella in one hand. She hurriedly curtsied and went up to greet them. Madam is slightly unwell and specially instructed this old servant to wait here for Madam Qiao and the Crown Princess. Then, she turned and nodded to the coachman. I'll have to trouble you to drive the carriage directly into the front courtyard. Please follow me. Arbor sat down again. Just as the mother and daughter's carriage was about to drive in with the old mama, they heard an extremely sharp and untimely scolding sound. Why can their carriage drive in, but ours can't? Could it be that our commandery princess is inferior to others? The black-robed old mama stood in front of that troublesome servant girl and shouted angrily, Who are you? That servant girl was very unreasonable. At this time, she didn't even hold the umbrella and stood in the rain with her hands on her hips. She shouted at the old mama, Are your dog eyes blind? You don't even recognize our commandery Princess Tao. What, you unruly old servant, are you thinking of rebelling? The black-robed old mama was so angry that her face turned red. She had seen the invitation card and guest list sent by Madam. She really had never heard of this commandery Princess Tao. She really couldn't be blamed for being ignorant and inexperienced. At this moment, Su Shitao was sitting in a carriage with the curtains rolled up. A servant was crouching beside the carriage, waiting for this young lady to alight. Su Shitao looked coldly at the old nanny in green clothes. His expression was gloomy and uncertain. Then, he retracted the leg he had stretched out. At this moment, he was still sitting in the carriage, motionless. One had to earn one's reputation. As the eldest miss of King Zheng's residence, which part of her was inferior to others? Why could other people's carriages drive directly into the Duke of Huainan's mansion, but she had to get off the carriage at the public passage and walk into the mansion with an umbrella like those madams and young misses? Although they had only walked for a few minutes, the symbol of their status was immediately different. All the carriages that could drive into the Duke of Huainan's mansion, which one of them wasn't a madam of an official or a miss of an aristocratic family? What did she, Su Shitao, owe him? She was also the eldest young miss of King Zheng's residence, all right? At this moment, a middle-aged woman, Sun Yang, who was wearing a peacock green long dress and a golden cloth in her hair, walked up swaggeringly. She covered her mouth and smiled at the old nanny in green clothes. So it's Nanny Lu, Madam's personal servant. It's really wrong of you to do this. This is Commandery Princess Tao of King Zheng's residence. You can't be so rude to others. Why aren't you kneeling to greet Commandery Princess Tao? The old nanny in green clothes was stunned. Just as she was about to reply, she heard the young crown princess sneer through the curtains. Commandery Princess Tao is so imposing. You dare to show off in front of this consort. Aren't you mighty? Su Shitao was shocked. Chapter 51-45. When this voice entered Su Shitao's ears, her entire body stiffened for no reason. It's her. That damned crown princess. This voice was unforgettable for her entire life. For a while, it even caused her to have nightmares again and again. After all, she didn't know how many times she had suffered in this person's hands. Now that she thought about it, her teeth itched with hatred. Kai Xiu and Kai Chi rolled up the carriage's curtain, revealing Wei Ziqin and her daughter sitting in the middle. Su Shitao glanced at them and couldn't help but avert her gaze. This person was dressed in a moon-white robe with a silver-red cloak, simple but not lacking in luxurious aura. The accessories in her hair were also very simple. There was only a phoenix hairpin with pearls in it, and 2 tasseled beads hanging from her temples, but it added a touch of glamour to her spirit. A person as cold as ice didn't need much decoration at all, because her movements were beautiful. She was like a noble lady from an aristocratic family who walked out of a landscape painting, but also like a person who was raised in the depths of the palace, burning incense and playing the zither all day long. In just one face-to-face encounter, Su Shitao felt that she was fiercely defeated. In front of this person, she was like the difference between a sparrow and a phoenix. Although she didn't want to admit it, she was very clear in her subconscious that it was the difference between cloud and mud. Su Shitao clenched her teeth and fiercely said to herself in her heart, "Illusion, everything is an illusion." She couldn't be more clear about the nature of this crown princess. What demure lady who walked out of an ink painting, what gentle noble lady who stayed in the depths of the palace, it was all an illusion. The person in front of her was someone who could easily cripple Su Shihua, Su Shitao's older brother. She was someone who could use power to intimidate her eldest brother, Mo Shikang. This woman wasn't as gentle, elegant, and dignified as she was now. She was an evil spirit, an Azura, a person who would never reason with you. Su Shitao took a deep breath. Just as she was about to speak, she heard a palace maid beside the crown princess shout at her with a stern face, "Bold woman, how dare you sit in the carriage and speak to the crown princess like this?" With a meaningful glance from Kai Chi, 2 black-clothed bodyguards immediately came out from behind the carriage and rushed to Su Shitao's side. Su Shitao didn't see what the 2 of them did, but he cried out in alarm. He felt his body become light as someone kicked him off the carriage. "Miss!" A servant girl with a plump figure and a thick braid cried out in alarm and rushed forward to help her up. However, before he could run far, he felt as if something had hit his foot. A numbing sensation came over him, and his legs went soft. He fell to the ground, half lying in the pond. Su Shitao was in a miserable state. After being kicked off the carriage by the black-clothed bodyguard, he immediately knelt down in the puddle, his knees hurting. Now, her pretty face was burning up, and she felt a burning pain on her face. She felt the gazes of the surrounding madams and young misses all land on her. Some were snickering with ill intentions, while others were pitying her. All of these gazes were like steel needles, piercing her body. Ah! Su Shitao's scream had just escaped her mouth when she suddenly felt pain in her throat. She couldn't make a sound for no reason. She knew that this was bad. This must be the dirty tricks of that little crown princess. That person was really vicious. It was just a few words of dispute between girls, and she actually poisoned her to make her lose her voice. Arbor glanced at Su Shitao indifferently. Chapter 51-46. Seeing Su Qianxi's sorry figure drenched from head to toe in the rain, she immediately lost interest in continuing to chat with her. Such a brainless thing was not qualified to be Jojo's opponent. She had no interest in teaching this person a lesson. Ordering Caixio to lower the curtain, the young crown princess waved her hand for the carriage driver to leave with the blue-robed nanny. The old nanny surnamed Lu had witnessed this scene from beginning to end. She already had some understanding of the young crown princess's temperament. She knew that although this crown princess looked young, she was definitely not someone to be trifled with. She did not dare to be negligent and led the young crown princess's carriage into the Count of Huainan's fu. Madame Count of Huainan personally welcomed the two in the main hall and introduced a tall young woman to Wei Ziqing with a smile. Lu Ying, come and greet the crown princess and Madame Qiao. Lu Ying, the eldest legitimate daughter of Count of Huainan's fu, stepped forward and politely bowed to Arbor and Wei Ziqing. She said with a smile, the crown princess and Madame Qiao's presence at mother's birthday banquet brings light to our entire count's fu. Wei Ziqing said with a smile, no need to be so courteous. On the other side, the second madam of the count's fu, Madame Bao, hurriedly directed a few servant girls to help the dirty Su Shitao up. The second madam frowned and endured the strange smell coming from Su Shitao's body. She smiled brightly, Miss Su, why don't you come into the fu with me to change clothes first? Your figure is similar to my daughter's. If you don't mind, you should be able to wear clothes. Su Shitao originally wanted to refuse and say that she disliked wearing other people's second-hand clothes and wanted to return home. But after thinking about how she had been tricked into such a sorry state, her desire for revenge couldn't help but stir. She gnashed her teeth in hatred, but she couldn't open her mouth to speak. Madame Bao was a little confused. She glanced at Su Shitao and asked tentatively, does Miss Su have other plans? In fact, Madame Bao wanted Su Shitao to return to Prince Zheng's mansion as soon as possible. Wouldn't it be awkward if everyone stayed behind to face each other? Unexpectedly, Su Shitao agreed and followed her into the count's residence to change his clothes. Madame Bao thought that she had finally learned her lesson after being taught a lesson. However, she never expected that Su Shitao had stayed behind with the intention of taking revenge on that crown princess. Su Shitao didn't say anything on the surface, but he was actually filled with hatred in his heart. Before that barbaric crown princess came, second concubine had been so respectful to her that she didn't need anyone to teach her how to address her as Princess Tao. But now although she hated those who changed sides, the most hateful person was still the crown princess who didn't give her any face. In the eyes of this crown princess, was her Prince Zheng's residence really that unbearable? It was as if there was no need to care about him at all. Filled with resentment, Princess Tao was dragged away by Madame Bao to change her clothes. Wei Ziqing and Madame Count Huainan chatted for a while before walking out hand in hand. Madame Count Huainan said as she spoke, I'll introduce you to a few friends. The two of them walked out on their own and left the young crown prince consort behind. Arbor looked at his mother's back in a daze. He pursed his lips and turned his head to see Fong Luying looking at him with a smile. I heard that the crown princess is a heaven-grade alchemist. Could you give Luying some pointers? Tomorrow, I'll make up for 2 more chapters. Chapter 51-47. Arbor was a bit curious. You're also an alchemist. The other party smiled bashfully at her and nodded before shaking her head. She said, I am just that, I'm not that skilled at refining pills. I can only succeed once or twice out of 10 times. Arbor blinked and comforted her gently, not understanding the situation. Then newly refined pills will indeed be like this. You can refine them a few more times in the future, and it'll be fine once you're proficient. Yet Fong Luying smiled embarrassedly. I refine common pills like blood-clotting pills and body-strengthening pills every day. I've probably refined them more than 100 times already. Presumably, it's because I'm limited by my aptitude that my success rate is so low. Arbor, the little stoic, was momentarily at a loss for words. Why did normal people often fail when refining pills? At most, the majority of people would fail multiple times when refining new pills at the beginning. After they became proficient in the future, the only difference would be the success rate. The better ones had a higher success rate and could refine 2 or 3 pills. The worse ones could at least refine 1 pill at a time, right? She had never heard of any alchemist who would fail 8 or 9 times out of 10 after refining common pills several hundred times. How unlucky and lacking in aptitude would one have to be able to do this? When Arbor thought of this, she couldn't help but look sympathetically at Miss Fong Luiying. This girl's appearance was upright and virtuous, and she didn't look like a clown. Fong Luiying was very perceptive. When she saw Cheong Amu looking at her, she hastily explained, "I've made a fool of myself in front of the crown princess. Luiying doesn't have any aptitude for refining pills since she was young, and I've previously invited several pill masters to teach me. They also said that Luiying doesn't have any aptitude. But if it doesn't hinder the crown princess, I would be very grateful if the crown princess could give Luiying some pointers." Arbor thought that she had nothing to do now, so she nodded at her. "All right then. First find a place and refine a pill for me to see." Hence the little crown princess was so angry that she almost kicked Fong Luiying twice. When this guy said that he didn't have any talent in alchemy, he was just being humble. It wasn't that she didn't have any talent in alchemy, it was that she didn't even have the slightest bit of basic medicinal knowledge. It was fine if she couldn't recognize all the medicinal herbs, but she couldn't even grasp the amount of medicinal herbs needed for the hemostasis pill. Therefore, not to mention failing 8 or 9 times out of 10, it was already giving her face if he didn't fail 10 times out of 10. The 1 or 2 chances of success were probably due to the luck of the god of creation. "You've thrown things out so carelessly. Has your furnace never exploded before?" "I did." Young Miss Fong gave the little crown princess a look of affirmation and nodded very seriously. "Because the furnace is going to explode every 2 to 3 days, my small medicine room has been moved to the most remote part of the court." The little stoic, she had almost nothing left to say. "Actually, have you ever thought that, instead of going through so much trouble, why don't you hire 2 pill refiners by your side?" The little crown princess tried to reason with this one-track-minded Miss Fong. "How can that do? I don't trust a single one of those pill refiners. I have to refine a body-strengthening pill for my mother so that I can nurse her body back to health step by step in the future." "You are doing this for your mother?" the little stoic asked hesitantly. Young Miss Fong nodded heavily and turned to look at the little crown princess. Chapter 51-48. Crown Princess, did I grasp the pill refinement method incorrectly? The little stoic also didn't know how to explain it to her. If she told the truth, she was afraid it would dampen her enthusiasm, but if she told a lie, it didn't suit her personality. Hence, she simply changed the topic and said, "If you start learning basic pharmacology, you should be able to improve more. You can go to a pill shop to take a look and buy some basic pharmacology books. You can start by self-studying step by step." Fong Luiying listened earnestly and nodded repeatedly, as if she had taken the little stoic's words to heart. "Your mother took the body-strengthening pill, but it's not very useful now. When I first saw your mother, I thought her complexion was slightly sallow, perhaps due to spleen deficiency or eczema. But when I saw her again today, I discovered that her glabella is yellow with a tinge of black. This is a sign of being poisoned." "What?" Fong Luiying lowered her voice and exclaimed, "Crown Princess, you're saying my mother is poisoned?" The little crown princess nodded with certainty. "She is poisoned, and it's quite severe. It should be the kind of poison that has accumulated in her body over a long period of time and hasn't completely erupted yet. That's why she only looks weak." Fong Luiying was both alarmed and furious, and her body actually tottered. She didn't expect that it wasn't that her mother's body wasn't well, but that someone had ulterior motives and poisoned her over a long period of time. "But my mother has been receiving treatment for a long period of time. Why didn't the physician say that she..." Fong Luiying trailed off when she reached this point. She wasn't truly stupid and naturally understood that if the physician was intentionally concealing it, then it meant that the physician was colluding with the person who poisoned her. I have a bottle of self-made all-purpose antidote pills. Give one to your mother every 3 days, and you'll see results after 3 times. If the results aren't good, I'll give it to your mother at that time. Arbor added, but normally, as long as it's not a poison pill refined from sacred rank herbs, it's basically detoxifying. Fong Luiying thanked him profusely and reached out to take it. She was just short of kneeling down and kowtowing to the little crown princess. Arbor waved his hand for her to stand up. Do you still want to learn pill refinement? Yes. Fong Luiying nodded. Even if I'm not talented, I still want to read more medical books. Although I'm stupid, I'll learn for 2 or 3 years if other people learn for a year. There will be a day when I should also have some small achievements. Arbor pursed his lips. He took a piece of paper and wrote down a series of book titles for her. Follow this list and go to the pill house to buy books. Read them one by one. Even if you memorize them by rote, you'll still be able to memorize them. When the time comes, you can sort out all the questions you don't understand and ask me one by one. Fong Luiying beamed with joy as she took the book list and nodded repeatedly. Thank you, Crown Princess. Thank you, Crown Princess. Is young Miss here? A gentle voice came from outside the courtyard. Fong Luiying hurriedly kept the book list in her inner world. She turned to Arbor and said in a low voice, from the sound of it, it seems to be second sister's servant. Crown Princess, please wait for a moment. I'll go out and take a look. Arbor grunted and waved his hand nonchalantly. He casually picked up the pill furnace that Fong Luiying had placed on the table and touched it up and down. Although Fong Luiying didn't know how to refine pills, this furnace was still a spirit tool. Fong Luiying couldn't help but smile. This pill furnace is quite a coincidence. I accidentally found it in the market. I didn't expect it to be such a good spirit tool. Chapter 5149. As expected, your dog's hit luck is pretty good. Arbor thought inwardly. She then heard that servant girl's voice urgently ring out again. Eldest miss, this servant is coming in now. Creak. Fong Luiying pulled open the double doors with all her might with a sullen face and strode out. She blocked the doorway and coldly glanced at that maidservant who was sticking her head out to look around. What are you looking at? What are you doing in my pill refinement room when you don't have any rules? The maidservant hung her head and inwardly pursed her lips in disdain. She thought, if it weren't for my family's miss telling me to coax you over, who do you think would be willing to come to your crappy pill refinement room that's riddled with dangers? This damned place would explode at the slightest provocation. All the servants in the estate had always kept a respectful distance from this damned place. They had always stayed as far away as possible from this damned place. Did you think she liked coming here? If it weren't for the maidservant's eyes swiveled, and she walked up to greet Fong Luiying with a grin. She said with a smile, Eldest Miss, this servant came under orders to invite Eldest Miss and the Crown Princess to Willow Garden together. The banquet hasn't started yet. My family's miss has invited many patrician families' young misses to Willow Garden to admire the koi. Fong Luiying looked disinterested and waved her hand. No need, I still have several pills to refine. That maidservant couldn't resist rolling her eyes and suppressing her bellyful of disdain. She carefully smiled and said flatteringly, then you can refine pills at any time. My family's miss said that it's rare for so many older and younger sisters to gather together. Hopefully, eldest miss won't neglect these guests. Besides, if you don't go, then the Crown Princess might want to go take a look. Not going. The young Crown Prince Consort's crisp words immediately made that lass swallow back all the words she had yet to say. This Crown Princess was truly unreasonable. She had already spoken to this extent, but she actually flatly refused. This really was not giving her family's miss any face. If the little stoic knew this maidservant's unspoken criticism, she would definitely sneer and retort, "Face? How much weight is your family's second miss worth? She still wants me to give her face, heh?" Servant Xiao Mian greets the crown princess. That servant girl nimbly scuttled forward. Separated by the door, eldest Miss Fong Luiying hurriedly bowed to Arbor. "Crown Princess, our Willow Courtyard's pond has recently had quite a few precious species of koi fish." The second young miss was thinking. At this moment, the rain had stopped and the sky had brightened up. "I'll accompany the ladies to the Willow Garden. If the Crown Princess can honor me, is there something wrong with your ears? This consort already said that this consort won't honor you." This consort's words once again made the servant girl swallow her words. Fong Luiying was speechless. If it weren't for the fact that the little crown princess was in the room behind her, Miss Fong would have burst out laughing. He didn't expect the crown princess to be such a person. Her frankness and straightforwardness were simply adorable. The girl called Xiao Mian felt her face heat up. The crown princess's merciless words were simply a slap to her family's miss's face. She really didn't give her miss any face at all. Xiao Mian was here to invite someone. Asking the crown princess to go was secondary, but Miss said that she must invite eldest Mississippi. If she couldn't invite eldest Miss over now, she wouldn't be able to escape a beating either. That would be miserable. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but feel a bit flustered. Chapter 5150. The maidservant cried out pitifully, "Crown Princess, eldest Miss, our Miss came to invite you with good intentions. The young misses of the various families are also waiting at the pavilion for the Crown Princess and eldest Miss to go. If the two of you don't go, then wouldn't you be letting down the many young misses' good intentions?" As she spoke, she started to cry, feeling very wronged. Arbor walked out of the door, and his cold gaze landed on the maidservant. The corners of his lips curled up coldly. "Are you sure? Are you sure which aristocratic young misses are really willing to see this crown princess go? Her purpose for coming today was actually to accompany her mother to visit her friends. If no one provoked her, perhaps after the lunch banquet, she would accompany her mother back. But if someone didn't have eyes and wanted to provoke her, then don't blame her for being merciless." Fong Luiying couldn't help but frown. She thought of the young crown princess's words and associated it with the chronic poison in her mother's body. Now that she looked at this scheming and cunning maidservant by her second sister's side, the more she looked at her, the more she disliked her. Could her mother's chronic poison be related to second aunt and her daughter? All these years, second aunt had controlled the manor's finances and had long been itching to kick her mother out and take the position of the mistress of the household. It was just that her status was still a little low and couldn't suppress her mother. But if her mother's body gradually weakened, or even died, Fong Luiying couldn't help but shudder. When she came back to her senses, her gaze towards the maidservant Xiao Mian instantly became extremely cold. For a moment, Xiao Mian thought that her eyes were playing tricks on her and couldn't help but look up again. Coincidentally, she met Lu Ying's cold and lonely eyes, which were sharp and sharp. Xiao Mian couldn't help but jump in fright. Although this eldest miss wasn't someone who would be bullied and humiliated by others, because she was often addicted to alchemy and didn't know much about alchemy, she always looked a little silly. But seeing her today, it seemed that eldest Miss's aura was much stronger. Could it be because Xiao Mian sneakily glanced towards Arbor, and she was secretly alarmed? Could it be because the crown princess was supporting her? Things were not looking good for them. If the crown princess supported the eldest miss and her daughter, then their second miss would have a hard time in the future. What? You're going to invite the crown princess to come to the Willow Garden to admire the fish? A surprised cry broke the laughter of the young ladies. Plop. Miss Gao of the Right Prime Minister's family, in her nervousness, dropped half a bag of fish food into the water. The fish spread out in the water like a celestial maiden scattering flowers. Many koi fishes crowded around and continued to fight for the food. Fong Mingyue, who had a slight smile on her face, turned to look at the girl who had cried out in alarm. "Miss Li, what are you doing?" Miss Li coughed a little awkwardly. "No, nothing. I just find it strange." That's true, that's true. Hee hee. She laughed dryly and looked at Fong Mingyue with a complicated gaze. Miss Fong didn't seem to have come to the last few gatherings in the palace. Fong Mingyue's expression stiffened slightly. The noble lady beside Miss Li hurriedly bumped into her. Miss Li instantly realized and laughed awkwardly again. Right. That was to invite the first wife's daughter. It would have been better if she didn't explain. Once she did, Fong Mingyue's face darkened even more. The noble lady beside Miss Li couldn't help but roll her eyes. Chapter 51-51. What does Miss Li mean? Fong Mingyue maintained a stiff smile and secretly gritted her teeth. Did these legitimate daughters come together to slap her in the face? This Miss Li was only the legitimate daughter of the Honglu Temple's deputy minister, a lowly official. How dare she look down on a girl from the Duke of Huainan's mansion? Fong Mingyue was not a broad-minded person, and she had already exploded from Miss Li's words. The noble lady beside Miss Li hurriedly tugged at her foolish best friend and said to Fong Mingyue with an apologetic smile, "Miss Li is outspoken and didn't mean to ridicule second Mississippi Miss Fong, please don't think too much." Fong Mingyue said with a fake smile, "So it's the legitimate daughter of Censor Jiang. I've always heard that Miss Jiang and Miss Li are good friends. You two are really close and inseparable." Miss Jiang smiled gently and didn't say anything. Miss Li was also tugged by her, so she didn't say anything. Fong Mingyue made a mental note of them and turned to look at the girl leaning on the edge of the pond. "Your Highness, what do you think of our pond?" "Not bad." Princess Tao raised her head proudly and pointed at a koi fish not far away. "Our mansion also has that kind of golden koi, and this, and that. We have all of these. Overall, the koi fish in your pond are 10% or 20% of the size of those in my mansion." Everyone was speechless when they heard this. Princess Tao's EQ was really low. It was enough that she praised Prince Zheng's mansion in different ways, but she didn't need to say that the koi fish in their pond were less than 10% or 20% of those in Prince Zheng's mansion. Fong Mingyue's face darkened, and she couldn't help but call Su Shitao an idiot in her heart. If it weren't for Prince Zheng's mansion, she, as the daughter of the Duke of Huainan's mansion, wouldn't have to lower her voice and listen to her nonsense. Princess Tao's words immediately caused an awkward silence. Everyone silently stared at the koi fish in the pond, occasionally sprinkling some fish food, and fell into a state of silent observation. At this moment, a koi fish happened to jump out of the water. The girls laughed and pointed at the koi fish that jumped out of the water, laughing and shouting, "Look, look! Don't tell me this koi fish has become a spirit. It's so lively and active." Everyone slightly pushed each other. A few ladies originally wanted to squeeze to the railing to take a closer look, but in the end, they accidentally squeezed Su Shitao. Su Shitao's bent calf hit the railing with a dong. It was so painful that her face scrunched up and she screamed, Who hit this princess? She was really unlucky." Previously, when he was kicked off the carriage by the crown princess's 2 bodyguards, his knees were heavily smashed into a puddle and were already bruised. Now that he was being squeezed and bumped by someone, he was afraid that he would bleed. She turned her head angrily and saw a familiar-looking woman. She took a few steps back. "You bitch again. Are you trying to make things difficult for me today?" Princess Tao flew into a rage and glared at the woman who took a few steps back. "No, it's not me, it's not." This was the concubine's daughter from Assistant Minister Zhang's family who collided with Princess Tao's carriage and caused it to flip over. Previously in the carriage incident, Miss Zhang had already experienced Princess Tao's fierceness and terrifying fierceness. Unexpectedly, the two of them bumped into each other again. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.